Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for June 23rd, 2022. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Ashley?
Here.
Commissioner Zhush?
Here.
Commissioner McGiffney?
Here.
Commissioner Skidmore? Here. Commissioner Sprague? Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before I have commission member announcements or reports, we do have we have a lot of people here tonight. We do have a Spanish language translator. If you'd like to come up and explain how to access your service. Thank you.
Si hay alguna persona que no habla inglés, solamente español, atrás en la esquina hay una mesa que tiene los audífonos para que escuchen lo que está ocurriendo.
Thank you. Okay, commission member announcements or reports. Hearing none, we will skip item C for the time being and refer to that next meeting. Item D, cases which are on request for continuance. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one item that had been identified for a continuance. That item is appeal number 1, map 12432. Our applicant is Jagdeep Ranji by QK Inc. The staff recommendation is to continue that project until your July 14th, 2022 hearing. That completes the items withdrawn or request for continuance.
I'll make a motion to approve cases withdrawn as read into the record by Mr. Murphy.
Second.
Motion is second. Call the vote.
Aye.
Aye. That's a casted vote, is it not?
What's that?
Isn't that a casted vote that has to be casted? Correct, Mr. Murphy? It's not a roll call vote, is it?
No, it's a cast. There we go.
Four ayes, one absent. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Got ahead of ourselves here a little bit. Item E, consent items. These are items for the Planning Commission which are recommended for approval by the staff, and the applicant has been informed of any special conditions and has no objection. The hearing on these items may be expedited if no member of the Commission or audience wishes to comment or ask questions on the case. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. So right now we have 3 items that are on consent calendar. However, I do have some revised recommendations for 2 of those items. The first item is case number 1. This is zone change case number 9, map 58, ag preserve number 14, map 58 exclusion, modification number 2 to map 58, and tentative parcel map number 12436. Our applicant is Daniel Rudnick by LAV Pinnacle Engineering. This project is located on the east side of Brandy Joe Street at Nancy Lane Avenue in the Shafter area. The actions before your commission tonight include a change of zone classification from A to E5 or a more restrictive district, exclusion of 19.93 acres from the boundaries of Ag Preserve, a zone modification to allow 4 parcels ranging in size from 4.98 acres to 4.99 acres, where a 5-acre is required in an E5 district, and investing tentative parcel map number 12436, proposing to divide a 19.93 acre parcel into 4 parcels, again ranging in size from 4.98 acres to 4.99 acres. I would note that within your staff report, under condition 6I of the proposed tentative parcel map, we had one typo. We had referenced the word west when we should have referenced the word east. So the existing condition 6I reads, record through the Public Works Department an irrevocable offer of dedication to the County of Kern of all subject property along the condition currently reads west. Staff is recommending that revision say east instead. So it should read Kern of all subject property along the east map boundary, 55 feet in width per Kern County Land Division Ordinance and Development Standards. So with that one typo, the applicant has been aware of that and does agree with that change. The overall recommendation now before your commission is to advise the Planning Commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve the zone change as requested, approve ag preserve exclusion as requested, approve zone modification subject to the recommended conditions, approve vesting tentative parcel map subject to the recommended revised conditions, which includes the revisions to 6I as read into the record today, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution. The next item on consent right now is case number 3. This is zone change case number 93, map 81, parcel map waiver number 11-19. Our applicant is Bel Air Oil Company by McIntosh and Associates. This project is located on the north and south side of James Road, approximately 1/2 mile east of State Route 65. Your commission did receive an addendum staff report regarding this project, and it has been requested this item be continued until your July 14th, 2022 hearing. The project applicant has been made aware of this and concurs with that recommendation and is further asking this item be continued. So the revised recommendation for your commission now to consider on the consent calendar is to continue this project until your July 14th, 2022 hearing. And finally, the last case on consent is GPA number 5, map 10333, zone change 16, map 10333. Our applicant is FLP Larkus LLC by SC Planners Inc. This project is located between the East California Avenue and Larkus Avenue at 2010 Larkus Avenue in unincorporated Bakersfield. The two actions before your commission today are to amend the land use element of the Metropolitan Bakers General Plan from map code SI to map code HR on approximately 1.57 acre parcel, a change in zone classification from M2 to R3 or a more restrictive district on approximately 1.57 acre parcel that would facilitate the completion of an existing multifamily residential development on site. The staff recommendation is to advise your commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve the general plan amendment as requested, adopt the resolution and recommended findings, and enact ordinance approving the zone change as requested as set forth in the attached draft resolutions. That completes the reading of the consent calendar tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Were there any members of the commission wishing to pull these off consent? I don't think there was. Any member of the public have any objection to this consent agenda? I did not see anybody come up. Seeing none and hearing none, is there someone?
Sorry. I'm a little new to this. Forgive me. I don't know if our map is in this.
It is not. Your map will be on the item number 2 that will be considered with the power presentation going before.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm new to this. Okay.
Okay.
If there are no other objections, I would make a motion to approve the 3 consent cases as read into the calendar or into the record.
I believe we have to move to continue item 3.
That's part of the consent
Okay.
agenda, I
Yep.
believe.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the vote.
Four ayes, one absent. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Murphy, do I have a right to appeal on any of these?
Mr. Chairman, we do not. All 3 of these items, well, the one that's being continued, but the other 2 items that were approved are recommendations and therefore will be scheduled for consideration by the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. Item F of public presentations. This is a portion of the meeting reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter not on this agenda, in which the commission has jurisdiction. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record before making any presentation. Seeing no public presentation, and it is dark in the back, so if you are going to speak, make sure you come up and be recognized. Thank you. Seeing none, item G, public hearings. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So the item before you today that is going to be discussed is case number 2. This is the Kern County Housing Element Implementation 2022 program. Again, the applicant is the Kern County Planning and Natural Resources Department. The project sites are located on various locations county-wide, and staff is recommending, and the projects do consider a number of various changes to existing land use designations that would ultimately facilitate higher density residential development as required by the Kern County Housing Element. So before I give my presentation, just for members of the audience benefit, I just want to make sure I point out, if you have not seen this, we have blue sheets that are in the back by where your agendas were located. The purpose of these sheets will be to allow you, when you provide comments, to provide the commissioners with the number on the left-hand side if you have a project that you're specifically wanting to provide comments to. If you're providing your comments on the project in general, that's fine as well. But again, this blue paper will help you facilitate some of the comments, and our recommendations will be based on these numbers. So staff does have some revised recommendations that we're going to be presenting tonight, and so it is definitely worth your interest to make sure that you have a copy of the blue sheets in the back, and they are located by the agendas. And then you'll be able to find the corresponding project sites based on the numbers and locations. So again, thank you, Chairman McGiffney, members of the commission. Again, before I get started with the presentation, I also would like to introduce Ms. Cindy Hoover. Ms. Hoover is the division chief over our special projects unit. Ms. Hoover has been very involved in this project and has had many conversations with the residents that have provided comments and that are interested in this project. And I just wanted to make sure that they were able to put a face to a name and recognize that Ms. Cindy Hoover, sitting across the aisle, is who they've most likely been speaking with. So again, this item was originally scheduled for consideration by your commission at your May 26, 2022 hearing. The item was continued until June 9th due to a lack of quorum. Subsequent for setting that item for consideration, staff received a number of comments and had questions coming up regarding the request. And then as such, the item was continued until tonight's hearing that would allow staff sufficient time to adequately respond to these comments and provide comments to members who have contacted us directly. So as I previously mentioned, the project before your commission includes a series of proposed staff-initiated changes to various land use designations on 61 parcels that are located throughout unincorporated Kern County. These actions are necessary and would establish land uses suitable for future high-density residential projects. At this time, the actions do not include any proposed development. However, this project will implement the strategic goals of the adopted Kern County housing element. And then further, just for clarification, the county itself will not be the entity that would do any of the developing for these sites. Any development that would occur on site would be initiated by the individual project and property owners. So for background, on April 26th of 2016, the Kern County Board of Supervisors adopted the County of Kern Housing Element Update for the years 2015 through 2023. According to the RHNA, or what is known as the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, that was prepared by the Kern Council of Governments and that was presented in the housing element, the county itself has a total projected need over a 5-year planning cycle of providing land for 21,583 separate dwelling units. To provide some context, every jurisdiction is provided a RHNA number. The city of Bakersfield, the county of Kern, the city of Taft, anybody that has land use authority are provided this allocation number, and they're all required to adopt their own individual housing elements in order to facilitate potential development necessary to meet the identified allocation. Again, the RHNA that was provided for the county of Kern included 21,583 dwelling units for that development cycle. So further, as part of the adopting housing element, because the county, when we looked at all of our existing land that we had designated for residential development, there was identified shortfall of land that needed to be redesignated at higher density residential development to ensure that we have an adopted housing element. So when the housing element was adopted by the Kern County Board, the county committed to identifying an additional 33.57 acres of R3 zone land to meet our 4th cycle housing needs, and then an additional 180.57 acres of R3 zone land to meet our 5th housing cycle need. So meeting those requirements are the reasons we have these items before your commission this evening. So again, those actions before you are necessary to ensure ongoing compliance with all of our state housing laws. The general plan itself is considered the constitution of all land use planning documents. In California, every jurisdiction must adopt a general plan, and then that housing element is one component of the overall general plan. If the housing element is not in compliance, then the overall general plan might not be considered in compliance either. And if that happens, a number of development projects across the spectrum of our land use authority may not be able to occur. That is what makes this process and this project before you this evening so important. Page 3 of your staff report lists the funding programs that are dependent on the county to have a compliant housing element. The language that is included in the staff report and the programs that were directly identified, this language was directly taken from the California Department of Housing and Community Development website. So the programs that are directly connected to the housing element are the Community Block Grant Program, the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, Local Housing Trust Fund Program, Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, Permanent Local Housing Allocation Program, and then Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant Program. In addition to those programs, there's another set of funding available, projects and programs available to the county that comes from sites that have, as we go through the evaluation when grants are submitted, they are incentivized, the county would be incentivized to get some of those grants if we have a compliant housing element. Again, those programs themselves are also listed on page 3 of your staff report. On November 29th of 2021, the County of Kern received correspondence directly from the California Department of Housing and Community Development indicating that additional measures were required to ensure our ongoing compliance with our adopted housing element. Specifically, the county is required to immediately rezone 214.14 acres of land to high-density residential development. A copy of that letter that was received from HCD has been included in your staff report as attachment 1. The proposed project before your commission tonight will implement adopted Program 2.2.2 and Program 2.2.3 within our housing element. Proposed parcels were identified by staff along with few that were developer recommended based on applications that had been provided to staff or that had reached out to us prior to submitting an application. These parcels were identified based on the following element and state law requirements. So any parcels considered, the proposed parcels must currently be vacant or underutilized. The parcels must have access to adequate water and water supplies. Multifamily residential development must be allowed by right. Lot sizes must allow for at least 16 units. Zoning on sites must have an allowed density of 20 units per acre. The proposed parcels are compatible with the existing airport sphere of influence zones. The proposed parcels do not have severe physical constraints, which would preclude development. The proposed parcels are not located next to or near incompatible land uses, such as active oil fields, heavy industrial operations, or incompatible commercial activities. And the proposed parcels are located relatively near existing residential development and have access to amenities such as schools, healthcare facilities, and groceries. To ensure ongoing compliance with the provision regarding the density of 20 units per acre, staff will further be bringing forward to your commission for consideration a proposed change to Chapter 19.22 of the adopted zoning ordinance to establish a minimum density of 20 units per acre within all R3 zone district. So during the processing of this project and after hearing notices were circulated, staff did receive a lot of questions regarding how these parcels were selected. So I'd like to provide some guidance to your commission regarding that specifically. So initially, a list of 880 potential eligible parcels were identified by staff based on a review of available property data using our Geographical Information System, or the GIS system. That, along with various requests that we received from individual property owners, went into the initial consideration and phase of analysis. The 880 parcels were then analyzed by staff based on that criteria that I described earlier. That list was condensed to approximately 100 parcels that were considered the most compatible to surrounding uses and the required criteria. Staff furthermore then contacted those property owners requesting identification whether or not they would have any concerns if staff initiated these changes in zoning on these properties. Approximately 40 parcels were removed based on that ongoing communication with the site property owners and an overall desire from staff not to over-concentrate any specific planning area with proposed rezoning requests. So the current project and proposals that are before your commission today include 61 parcels that have been identified in Table 1 and can be found on pages 6 through 9 of your staff report. Within Table 1, and as I previously mentioned a minute ago, each of the site has been separately identified using a number that can be found on the far left column, meaning that your commission has the authority tonight to make any recommendations on each site individually if you so choose. Your final recommendations on each site could be to approve. You could recommend some sort of modified approval. You could recommend denial of any sites. You could recommend that any of the sites be continued for further discussion and analysis by staff, or you can refer back to staff a particular site for further review by staff, meaning that it would not come forward as part of this project any longer. It would come forward potentially at a later date. Staff has provided, as I mentioned earlier, a blue handout available to the members of the public and that have been provided to your commission. They will be able to, that will allow them and you to follow what projects and what project numbers they are specifically concerned about. The corresponding number is also used as a reference for recommendation purposes, which will be brought further as we make a recommendation regarding this proposed project. So throughout the process of this request, staff also received a number of questions regarding why they did not, or residents did or did not receive a hearing notice, and why signage was not posted regarding the proposed changes at any individual site. So what I'd like to do is real briefly describe the noticing requirements. So a number of years ago, the Board of Supervisors considered the overall county noticing requirements. The city of Bakersfield, if you aren't familiar, does require postage of signage at the site. A sign is placed on site that identifies that this is a proposed project. They do that along with noticing in the newspaper and mailouts. The Board of Supervisors considered whether or not they wanted to do a similar type of request. However, the advice that was given and their overall concern was ensuring the county has a universal system for hearing notices and consideration of projects countywide. The county itself is over 8,000 square miles. We have a desert, we have a mountain region. A lot of our projects are located in more rural areas of the county, at which a sign could actually be a nuisance. Areas of high wind, signages can get blown down, they could be vandalized. It was the overall Board of Supervisors' determination that they did not want to have any signage posted and that they wanted to remain consistent universally throughout the county. Therefore, the adopted standard remained the same, which is all of our notices are posted in various newspapers, and then we send notices out to properties located within 500 or 1,000 feet, depending on the size of the project being forwarded. So it is our hope in general that when this happens, projects that do generate a lot of interest and concerns, the property owners within that area talk to their neighbors. And over the 17 years I've processed and worked in this county, generally speaking, if there's a project that brings up interest, surrounding neighbors do have an ability and do find out about it. So, we have had no direction from the board to change our noticing process. But again, that is the process by which we followed to this case, and it's the same process we followed for all of the cases that come before your commission and before the Board of Supervisors. So, again, during the course of processing this request, which did include individual mailings to property owners within 1,000 feet of each of these project sites, as part of your initial staff report that was provided to you on Friday, staff did receive 132 separate comments. Of those 132 comments, 78 were submitted from residents, 50 comments were submitted from agencies, and 4 comments were submitted from various tribal groups. Overall, 5 of the comments were in support, 72 comments were in opposition, and 55 comments were submitted with recommendations or requirements for future development. In addition to those comments, staff did receive 3 separate petitions in oppositions, specifically for cases 19, 20, and 33. Staff also received over 40 phone calls regarding the proposed request, regarding clarification, and to provide their comments to the planning staff. So most of the questions or concerns that received included questions regarding why were these parcels chosen for rezoning? Are all of the land use changes occurring in one area of the county? Is this project going to create any traffic impacts? How will these proposed changes affect my property values? Is development being proposed at this time? Will it be subsidized Section 8 housing? Will this project affect my rural scenery or lifestyle? Is this project going to affect my privacy? How will future high-density development account for water services and increased water use? Is the proposed project going to increase crime rates and impact safety services? How will the proposed project influence our area's limited resources, i.e. schools and parks? How will the proposed projects address endangered species on various identified sites? So responses to all of those comments have been provided on pages 9 through 15 of your staff report. What I'd like to do now is take a few minutes to specifically discuss each of those responses and provide some of the summary responses to your commission at this time. So, regarding why these parcels were chosen for rezoning, I believe I generally kind of already addressed that comment. Again, these parcels were identified by staff. Some of the proposed parcels were identified through applicants who had either previously submitted an application and were wanting to begin the process of considering changes to higher density development, or had reached out to staff directly asking what our thoughts were regarding a potential project at various locations. Again, based on all of that, as I mentioned before, staff whittled those down to what we believed were the most likely candidates for consideration by your commission. The question regarding why all these land use changes, or the question of if all these land use changes are occurring in one area of the county, in short, the answer is no. Selection of these parcels were considered by the identified criteria I mentioned before, and then staff did make a conscious effort and decision to make sure that we spread out parcels regarding all areas of the county in order to meet our required criteria. In addition, when we went through our first initial list, we did notice that some areas seem to have a lot more proposed changes than various others, and so a conscious determination was made to spread out the proposed development within all of the developable areas of the county. Is the project going to create traffic impacts? So to answer that particular question, there are some existing development standards that help to address that concern. So at a project site level, any development that would create more than 50 peak hour trips will require a traffic study when a project is submitted to the County of Kern for review. Again, peak hour trips are limited to those prime hours during the morning and afternoon in which most of the traffic is occurring. To provide some guidance to your commission, a residential house itself is approximately, a single family residence generates approximately 10 trips per day. Multifamily generates approximately 7 trips per day, and commercial is much higher than all of it and generates a lot more trips than both residential and commercial. Now, I do understand if you have a lot more residential locations at one site, then yes, you could generate some additional traffic, even though the multifamily generates less trips on a per unit basis than single family housing. However, staff does believe that with the requirement to have that study, if a proposed size of a project would create that many trips, along with our existing development standards, especially in Metro Bakersfield, the Rosamond area, and anything in Tehachapi that have adopted traffic impact fees, which if project moves forward would be required to pay those fees, along with the requirement that the development would be required to build appropriate either type A or B infrastructure, depending on where it's located, staff believes that the majority of these traffic impact concerns can be addressed. As I mentioned earlier, staff did try to go through when we did our analysis of trying to make sure that sites that were proposed for this rezoning are located within areas along higher designated roads, so that any future development and any future build out in and around the site would match those roads and be built out at a higher level. Regarding projects and proposed changes to property values. So your commission is becoming experts on this particular question. Property value itself is ever changing. It is not the department's determination that any one particular site of high density residential development in general creates any specific impacts to property. When you compare that to what existing properties' lot sizes are, what their home sizes are, what school neighborhood they're located in, whether or not the county or is in an economic boom versus an economic recession of some sort. There are so many factors that relate to the impact of one's property value that staff does not believe at a general level is appropriate to say that one particular project will create various changes that affect your property more than some of those other items I had listed before. Clearly, at a site-specific level, there could be specific considerations that could be looked at, and that is something that your commission can consider in your overall consideration of this particular project. I would note that the county included a study from the Center for Housing Policy that supports our determination that in general, projects and multifamily projects itself do not create overall impacts to surrounding property values, provided the projects are adequately maintained and managed. Again, a lot of questions will come up regarding the projects that we have before us. And I'm kind of jumping ahead here to the next question as well. The actions before your commission are a request to change property to high density residential development. What ultimately gets developed at any of the preferred sites could be a range of type of developments. There could be some that are government assisted. There could be some that are market rate, and there could be some that are proposed that are complete luxury type apartments that even go above and beyond market rate. In your consideration of the project, along with staff consideration of the various sites, it is illegal for us to make a value when it comes to what type of project is or is not proposed. We have to look at it specifically at what is the density that's being proposed, and will that density have an impact on the surrounding communities, and is that density compatible with the surrounding properties? So while I understand that this is a topic of concern, again, before your commission tonight, I have no specific development projects before you, and there is no way for your commission to necessarily consider the merits of either of those, as you are specifically prohibited from doing that in accordance with state law. Regarding overall density too, which I'd like to just kind of comment on this comment as well, and I do understand the concerns that have been raised regarding multifamily development. And this is kind of a broader topic when it comes to housing in general. The state of California has indicated that we are in a housing crisis. Every single thing that the state does from a position of planning, locally especially, seems to be putting more and more restrictions on our local authority when it comes to development of land, specifically related to housing. A lot of people have said, well, I really don't want multifamily housing. I'd rather have single-family housing located next to me as well. And I do understand and respect that comment. But one of the things I would note is that housing in general is changing. People always find somewhere to live one way or the other. You know, there are a lot of places in the state you can travel to, and based on the cost of housing, you can find 2, if not 3 families living in an existing single-family home. That is something that occurs a lot of places, and those are R1 single-family designated lands. Further, the state has made recent changes with SB 9 and SB 10 that specifically says the county is prohibited from allowing individual single-family homes to have up to 4 units per house. Now, if you ask my opinion, I don't foresee a lot of existing R1 zoning changing that. I can tell you that I have had some individuals contact the planning department and say, I have this single-family home. I understand there are these new state laws. I would like to subdivide that land and I want to put 2 or 3 houses on it. There are very limited provisions that can be reviewed, but in general, staff has to allow that. What is a possibility is that as more single-family residential lots are built out in an area that is currently vacant, I could see developers creating those lots in such a manner to build it out as having 2 or 3 units on it per the requirements under SB 9 and 10. I understand that can be a concern as well. One of the ways to help ensure that we have an adequate housing supply that meets all of our requirements, that really tries to help make sure that single family can stay single family, is that we have to have available areas for multifamily development. Otherwise, I could potentially see R1 lots changing the dynamics of how they are. And so part of this request also is to look at what do we do and how can we potentially have more areas available for multifamily living. Right now, some recent articles indicated, both the Bakersfield Californian and that were reported at KERO 23 indicate that we have a 1.5 vacancy rate within the county of Kern and specifically the Bakersfield area. That is some of the lowest that it has been in decades. Part of the reason is it is increasingly more expensive to build housing at the single family level, and having a few more areas available for multifamily housing will start to address some of those needs. So again, while we are talking about each of these individual project-specific sites, there is a broader question that ultimately this county has to decide how we want to move forward. You know, we do believe that additional multifamily is needed. We do have a shortfall, which is really why this is coming forward. But again, those items that I brought to you reflect an ever-changing housing dynamic. And again, you know, a lot of people have mentioned, well, if you don't own your home, and if you live in an area you don't own it, you have less ownership, and therefore the quality of that unit, neighborhood, everything goes down. While I understand that comment as well, the same thing can happen in single-family residential neighborhoods as well. As the price of housing changes, as the dynamics of a neighborhood change, it is not uncommon to have homes that were originally built and owner occupied to now be, I don't want to say converted, but used as leases. There's a lot of individuals that I know that have decided to purchase a new home and they lease out their existing homes. Housing dynamic changes, and there is nothing that I can say today or anybody can say that would ensure that whatever was going to be at a particular site ultimately is what developed at that particular site. You know, we are looking at what the project is before us, but I just wanted to provide that comment to you in the broader context of housing and housing in general, in which the county will need to think about as we move forward over the next years, as more and more people either come in, or even, again, part of what we're talking about is not people moving into the county. There are existing residents that are already here. I can tell you that when we've hired planners, professional level planners, some of them have had difficulty finding places to live. I mean, that is just an honest truth that a lot of people are dealing with. And again, these items and these actions are one way to begin to address that. Regarding ongoing impacts to privacy, you know, I definitely understand, and that is one of the common theme comments that was provided. I would note that most of our privacy concerns are addressed in our existing development standards, and one could argue that you actually have more privacy with a multifamily lot, given some of the restrictions we require, than what would be done on more privacy on a multifamily lot than what could be done on a single family lot. So for example, there's a couple of existing development standards that are already in place that anybody that proposes multi-development has to adhere to when their project gets turned in. The first one is within our development standards 1980-020I. When construction is in excess of 1 story and is located adjacent to property zoned for single-family residential use, all windows above the 1st story and within 75 feet of the adjacent property zoned for single-family residential use shall contain glass that is opaque or translucent or shall be screened in a manner as approved by the planning director. For developments that require 20 or more dwelling units located within 65 feet of an interior side or rear property line that abuts single-family residential property, that shall be limited to a height of 1 story. So already, a lot of people's concerns, and I completely understand it because nobody, you know, unless you're a developer, unless you are interested in doing some sort of development, doesn't necessarily look at some of these existing protections that are already in place when it comes to multifamily development. Section 1980-020J. When more than 3 dwelling units will be constructed adjacent to property zoned E1, E1 half, E1 quarter, or R1, a 6-foot-high solid masonry wall shall be constructed between proposed development and adjacent property. The wall height shall be reduced to 4 feet within the required front side yard setbacks. You know, I completely understand, and some residents may comment that they have seen development that doesn't necessarily meet those provisions. Well, a lot of those developments could have been built prior to going through these requirements. I can tell you that if any development is proposed now, those are the provisions that are required, and from the very onset, the applicant knows that they have to adhere to those. A minimum of 10% of the total developed lot area needs to be landscaped. And again, we have a whole bunch of provisions for front yard and side yard areas regarding landscaping. Again, as I mentioned, greater safeguards for privacy concerns are addressed within the R3 residential development adjacent to specific districts above those that are required in an R1 parcel. Specifically, let's talk about size of homes. There is no determination an R1 lot can have 2-story homes. There's no requirement that those have opaque windows or anything along balconies. Balconies are specifically restricted when you have multifamily units that are adjacent to single-family residential lot sizes. A question was brought up regarding identified parcels, and they're located near recreational services. Again, that's part of our development standards. You know, as development occurs, project applicants are required to dedicate lands for parks. They're required to pay various parks districts so that they can start to create these parks. They are required to provide the school district with additional funds. That is how development facilitates changes in various land uses, is we have a whole bunch of provisions that project applicants are required to adhere to. Again, some of those very reasons and those very requirements are why the ever cost of developing housing is becoming more and more increased, and why the state is so stringent on their requirements that these uses be considered by right. How will future high-density development account for water services or increased water use? So I'd like to answer that question kind of at both a project level and then as a global comment. So first of all, just like any development, no development will be able to occur until a project applicant provides sufficient will-serve letter by the various district that provides that water. The County of Kern is not a water provider. Water is provided by various CSDs that are located and other agencies that are specifically designed to manage water usage. So part of our requirement when we went through this process is we needed to make sure that any site we identified is located within an area that has water and sewer providers. Again, that was one of the provisions. We were not allowed to provide any change in residential development on areas that would have to rely solely on groundwater, that didn't have agencies that could specifically provide public water or sewers. That is part of the reason why some of these sites were specifically identified. So again, at a project level, if we require a will-serve letter, staff believes that we've addressed overall issues related to is there enough water. Again, there are various agencies that are specifically mandated with managing, and there's a process by which those sites get incorporated into those agencies' ongoing development plans. On a global, more cumulative level, I would like to point out that most of the valley, the valley, areas in Ridgecrest, we're already subject to SGMA, the State Groundwater Management Act, in which the various water providers are required to help create a plan that helps to ensure that existing development matches overall water usage as it is. Residential single-family units, in comparison to multifamily, use a lot more water per person than are in multifamily areas. You know, what people use to water their grass and some of the other things, that uses more water. So if there is an overall concern from a county-wide level in terms of will we have enough water available to supply our population in its totality, part of the strategy is, well, maybe we do need to have more dense development. Farming. You know, the farming community, because they're in the valley and subject to SGMA, they are actively in the process of identifying what are the most valuable areas that we need to continue farming. What are the areas that we might not be able to farm anymore because of an overall water requirement that we have water not only for our ag uses, but for our future commercial industrial uses and our residential uses. Those are discussions that are ongoing right now. And again, if we continue as a whole, build out at the single family level, that is not necessarily the best approach if we're trying to look at water cumulatively from a regional level. Again, those are two separate ways to kind of look at that issue. The proposed projects, I believe, address both of those. One, there's no project that could be built, even if approved by your commission and the Board of Supervisors, if they can't get a will-serve letter from the appropriate agency to provide public water, they will not be able to ever get any building or grading permits to construct the site. So again, that onus is not changing. That's the exact same standard we have now. And again, we believe that that system works and should continue, and we believe that's how we've addressed those concerns, both at a project and a cumulative level. The proposed project is going to increase crime rates and impact safety services. So again, I want to answer that kind of as a similar two-point type of question. At a project-by-project level, and if someone were to say, will this apartment complex create an impact to safety and increase crime, I do not believe that that is a universal statement that can be made on high-density housing specifically. Could there particularly be individual sites? Maybe. That would look a very detailed review that we should go through if that potentially is the case. But as an overall comment, I do not believe that that is justified. While I understand there are very specific concerns regarding the project. Again, this is kind of a similar type of question to how I responded to water. So this statistic is a little bit older, and I know that it's changed as housing values have changed as well. But single-family residential uses and the property taxes that are generated from a single-family residential use do not always cover the cost to provide public services to the county as a whole. A number of years ago, it was estimated that you had to have a home valued at over $350,000 to generate the amount of property taxes to offset the community services need for public, fire, sheriff, things along those lines. Again, The market has changed. I would imagine that number has greatly increased, and I don't have any specific information to tell you what that is now. However, when you look at a per person use, multifamily doesn't quite have that same issue, and neither does commercial. You know, we generate more property taxes associated with that, and so from a cumulative level, that is offset to some degree based on the type of development that is occurring. So again, this is one of those unique situations where, again, overall, as a general statement, I do not believe there's any evidence to support that statement that it increased crime. I think it all depends on where you're located and how the site is managed. But it can be looked at a site-specific basis, and there could be certain unaccounted for circumstances that may indicate that on a very specific basis. But again, overall, as a broad statement, it is the county's position that that not is the factor. And again, that same study that I cited, done by the Center for Housing Policy, supports that same determination as well. How will the proposed project influence the area's limited resources, schools and parks? Again, I kind of already briefly answered that. Those projects are required to pay and provide dedications for both schools, parks, and again, that is how those agencies generate the either locations, the monies to cover the costs of the projects that are being proposed. And then finally, how will this project address endangered species on these various identified sites? So first of all, there is nothing that being recommended by staff or that your commission could implement that would supersede any state law. So the first thing, you know, ultimately is always the project applicant's determination, and it is their responsibility to make sure that they are not breaking any state or federal laws when it comes to endangered species. You know, some of the benefits of some of the locations we've identified here, like for example in Metro Bakersfield, we have an adopted habitat conservation plan. We have a provision in place right now that addresses that. When development occurs, they have to provide funds. They have to provide payments to help offset potential impacts to some of these various species. Again, that is how both the city and the county try to have conservation areas, and there's an entire process that those funds are go through to determine what areas should or should not be purchased for ultimate conservation. So again, we do believe that at a project by project level that is addressed, and ultimately with the simple fact that it is the project proponents' mandate on themselves not to violate any state or federal laws when it comes to endangered species. Next, what I'd like to do real quickly is discuss the addendum staff report, because we did receive some additional comments, and those comments were provided to you in your addendum staff report. So again, subsequent to the distribution of our staff report, staff did receive additional comments. We provided those comments to your commission this evening in the addendum staff report. Most of those comments received are similar to the comments that I already responded to. In total, staff received an additional 17 comment letters. Of those letters, 6 comments were in opposition to case number 20. 1 comment is in opposition to case number 1. 1 comment is in general opposition to the project as a whole. 3 comments were submitted in support of case number 32. 1 comment is a general support of the project, and 5 comments were from the California Department of Transportation. In addition, staff received a petition in opposition that was provided regarding case number 33, signed by 82 individuals. What I'd like to do is point out and respond to comments specifically submitted from the Sierra Club. While the Sierra Club is in general support of more dense housing development, they are concerned with the public participation process for future development of the sites and the ability to meet overall climate goals. They also expressed concerns for 2 of the sites identified for rezoning, which include sites 29 and 31. Regarding concerns related to future public hearing processes, in order to meet the state requirements, the future development must be allowed by right, meaning that there are not additional public hearings. So typically, staff requires that any multifamily development include a PD plan overlay, which would then require a publicly scheduled hearing before any construction could occur. Unfortunately, this process is not sufficient to meet the state requirements by which the staff is, which is why we're not including our customary PD overlay. I agree with the Sierra Club's comments in terms of overall, I do think it would be appropriate to have one more hearing where a site could be looked at specifically, as sometimes these compatibility issues can absolutely be addressed through that process. However, the state has been very clear, and I've had multiple conversations, including conversations with the state after our initial staff report was submitted, and expressed to them the concerns of the Sierra Club. And the very short answer is, in order to meet your provisions, the state requires that the county streamline high-density residential development processing, and they have said you should not include that PD overlay if it is your intent to have those parcels count towards consideration of our shortfall that we are trying to meet. Regarding sites 29 and 31, both of those sites are currently designated for future housing by the general plan. So housing is already identified for those projects. It's just a matter of what size and density. Staff is recommending that your commission move forward, recommending approval of Site 29, but we will be recommending that Site 31 be continued for further review by staff, and I'll express and provide some of that comments to you upon my final recommendation. So in conclusion, the need for the development and the preservation of adequate housing and affordable housing in Kern County has dramatically increased in recent years. Clearly, there's a need for more housing opportunities countywide. I specifically understand the residents are frustrated with this process, and if I'm being truthful, I'm extremely frustrated as well, specifically with the limitations and the project provisions by the state of California. However, be that as it may, they are there, and they are subject to the considerations that we have before you. With that being said, I do believe that this process and the items before your commission tonight is still a worthwhile endeavor. Again, as I had mentioned before, we are operating at a currently 1.5% vacancy rate in the metropolitan Bakersfield area, which is the lowest that we've had in decades. In general, the state of California has enacted specific housing laws that are built on the notion that housing is the foundation of life and opportunity, and I believe those are the provisions and the reasons why they are requiring some of this streamlined development facilitation. More than 3 million California households pay more than 30% of their income toward rent, and nearly 1/3 pay more than 50% of their income towards rent. Again, overall home ownership rates are at their lowest since the 1940s in California, and California is home to 12% of the nation's population, but a disproportionate 22% of the nation's homeless population. It's my opinion that there are so many factors that contribute to these statistics that are far beyond the control of any local jurisdiction, and while tonight's actions may not solve all of those identified housing crises, it is a step in the right direction and will help to ensure that the County of Kern is doing our part and we are staying in compliance with state laws. While staff believes that all of these sites are compatible, as I mentioned earlier, your commission can provide individual direction for each of the project sites. Based on the ongoing review in coordination with HCD regarding the specific requirement and provisions to meet our adequate and identified high-density residential shortfall, staff does have a revised recommendation for consideration by your commission today. We are recommending some of these sites be recommended for approval as recommended. We have 2 revisions to the sites, and we are recommending some of these sites be continued. What I'd like to do is specifically talk about the 2 sites that staff is recommending move forward, but that we have some specific revisions to. So I'd like to talk specifically about sites number 32 and sites number 33, which are some of the sites that have generated the majority of the comments that have been provided. For site number 32, and I believe we have a map to show this, which is located at the northwest corner of Nord and Hageman, the property owner itself, that was a site that was identified to us by the property owner, and that owner has requested that now only the northwest 10 acres be redesignated for high-density residential, while the remaining 15 acres of the site be designated for R1 single-family residential. That proposal has been presented to the adjacent neighborhood, and they have provided correspondence to the county, specifically withdrawing their opposition to the project with that specific revision. So, for site number 32, staff is recommending that your commission recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve a GPA from ER to HR on 10 acres, and again, that's the northwest 10 acres, as shown on that map, and then approve a GPA from ER to LMR on the remaining 15.41 acres. Staff is recommending a change in zone classification from A to R3 on that 10 acres in the northwest, and then a change in zone classification from A to R1 on the remaining 15.41 acres. The second item that we have a separate recommendation for is site number 33, which was also identified to staff by a potential project developer. That owner has revised their request, and they are now requesting that your commission authorize high-density residential on the southwestern 8 acres of the property, with the remaining acres to be designated for medium-density residential. For this particular site, I would like to note for your commission that the northernmost 7 acres that are located adjacent to the existing development is unbuildable due to the existing transmission line easements. So, as that project moves forward in whatever form, if it does move forward, regardless of what is recommended, the project site in most proximity to a lot of the comments that we received, that area won't be able to be built because there's an existing transmission easement that runs right along to the western eastern transmission line that runs all the way over there. Therefore, there wouldn't be any development that would occur from a residential standpoint or commercial standpoint under that as well. It could be designated or utilized as open space, but again, there would be no specific development. So the revised staff recommendation for Site 33 is to recommend your commission recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve a GPA from UER to HR on the southwestern 8 acres, and then a GPA from UER to HMR, which again is the medium density, on the remaining 30.23 acres, and then a change in zone classification from A to R3 on the southwestern 8 acres, and then a change in zone classification from A to R2 on the remaining 30.23 acres. The property owner for site number 22 has indicated to staff that they no longer wish to have their property redesignated. Therefore, because we had asked all of our property owners when we initiated this process if they wanted to be part of this project, because that applicant or that owner has specifically identified that they don't want to have their request considered, case number 22 has officially been withdrawn by staff and is not up for consideration by your commission this evening. So additionally, based on the comments received from staff, along with ongoing correspondence with the state regarding the requirement to ensure that a minimum density of 20-acre provision is also incorporated into this, staff is recommending that any overall project site that proposes the high-density residential development on more than 10 acres be continued until your August 11, 22 hearing to allow staff further evaluation, at which time we may come back with a revised site on those particular sites that decreases some of the overall density. We're going to evaluate that and move forward. Staff still is recommending that a number of the sites be recommended for approval as requested. So what I'd like to do now is read our final recommendation. And again, that is partly why this blue sheet, or if you have your staff report, the table found on page 6, I believe, is important as I go through this recommendation, as the numbers are located on the far left-hand column. So, the overall department recommendation is to advise the Planning Commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve amendments to the general and specific plan as recommended, approve changes to zone classification as recommended, and enact ordinance and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution for cases 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, 16, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 35, and 37. So the recommendation for those items would be as indicated in the staff report that had been provided to your commission. Staff is further recommending that we advise your commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve revised amendments to the general and specific plans as recommended, approve the revised changes in zone classifications as recommended, and enact ordinance and adopt suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution for cases 32 and 33 as read into the record by staff. Finally, staff is recommending and advising your commission to continue cases 1, 8, 11, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 28, 31, 34, and 36 to your August 11th, 2022 Planning Commission. What that will do is, again, those sites had more than 10 acres that were identified for high-density residential development. That will give staff one additional opportunity to review those sites, to review the comments we've received, and to provide a recommendation to your commission as to whether or not those sites should remain the same, or if we have any revised recommendations regarding those particular sites. But again, those items would be continued until your August 11th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. So that completes my presentation. Clearly, I am available for questions by your commission. Once your commission finishes asking questions, I would request that during the public testimony, you ask speakers to not only provide their name for the record, but also identify which project they are here to speak on. And again, those numbers can be found on the far right column of the blue handouts made available at tonight's meeting. I believe that that is the most efficient way to categorize the comments that you receive and allow your commission to decide how you want to move forward regarding all of these sites. So with that, I am available for questions to your commission if you have any before you go through any public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do any members of the commission have any questions for the staff?
Chairman McGiffney, I do.
Mr. Judge, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I was looking for some clarification on some of your comments, Mr. Murphy, and just so I have a better understanding of what was read out tonight. Understanding the shortcoming we're having in the cycle, fourth, fifth cycle, we did identify 21,503 dwelling units. I know this current density is 14,965. Are we still short approximately 600 units, or is that we already have those and this is now fulfilling our requirement?
Commissioner Judge, through the chair. So when we go through our housing element, again, that first thing we get is this RHNA number. And what we do is we look at all available housing that we have: single family, multifamily, high density, potentially mobile home parks. There's a number of factors that could be considered. When we went through that process in our last cycle, we looked to see what do we have in place. If we had, at that time, if we had had sufficient land available to meet all of those needs, there would not have been any requirements that the county go through any rezoning. But unfortunately, when that process went through, we had that shortfall. And so as part of the housing element, we have to not only does it provide guidance and it kind of talks about this is the overall housing demand, these are potential sites available for rezoning, XYZ, and it kind of provides a summary in general about the housing as it is. We have to develop a list of programs to facilitate housing throughout Kern County. Two of those programs, 2.2.3 and 2.2.2, that were adopted with the housing element, specifically said that the county will go through a process to rezone land to high-density residential development. Now, over the course of years, when we put that in there, we were absolutely hopeful that we would have project applicants that are coming to us, that are asking for that question, that are proposing that. And we have had other projects where we have thought we've been able to meet some of these requirements. Going through that entire time, we have not met the requirements, and the state of California Housing Department has specifically identified to us is that, county, you have not met those provisions that you adopted and you said you were going to move forward. That is why we have that provision and why we're bringing to your commission potential changes in land that would facilitate future R3 high-density residential development. It is our requirement and our need to address that 214-acre shortfall. Clearly, if you look at the projects before you tonight and you add up that acreage, it is more than 214 acres. Part of that was done for two reasons. One, we clearly understood that your commission, the Board of Supervisors, residential property owners, anybody else may have comments. And we couldn't be sure that whatever we recommended or brought forward to your commission ultimately could be approved. So clearly, we needed to have a buffer, I don't know if that's an appropriate word, but we wanted to have more land to allow the flexibility on a site-specific basis to be considered. Additionally to that, let's say we do have any land above and beyond the 2014 number that is identified. Well, in 2023, staff is going to be required to go through a whole new housing update, and we're going to have to adopt a new housing element. Any land that we redesignate now will be considered as part of our existing inventory when we go through that process at the next housing cycle. So, if we do decide to approve and move forward with land more than 214 acres, it is also the hope that that land then can count towards our next housing cycle when we get our new RENA number and we decide to move forward from that perspective.
Okay, so that helps me clarify that question. Thank you. Other question I want to understand too, still dealing with the state regulations that are put on our county. You talked a little bit about how there's about 6 different grant programs that could be affected if we don't meet our number. And this is just a quick question. Can we clarify, is my understanding that if it's not met, it also affects our Kern County state ranking when we do apply for other grant programs as far as if we qualify or not qualify?
Commissioner Judge, through the chair, for some programs, yes. That is the correct statement. Not all programs are 100% dependent on the housing element, but some programs they weigh that. And if you don't have a compliant housing element, you fall lower on the list in terms of our ability to receive some of those funds. In general, the county is required to constantly maintain a compliant general plan, and the housing element is part of that general plan. And again, at no time do we ever want to be out of compliance, as there potentially are ramifications. Whether or not the state ultimately decides, let's say we didn't approve these, is there a possibility that the state doesn't withhold any of the CDBG funding or anything along those lines? Maybe, but there's absolutely a possibility that they could, and they have that authority too. So, staff is not wanting to necessarily just bet on that. And plus, as I mentioned in part of my presentation, regardless of this particular provision and this particular mandate that we have to identify 214 acres, it does bring a bigger comment and question to the table, and the county does have a responsibility to help provide housing across all of our segments and in all areas of the county. And so while we are absolutely trying to meet that need and that requirement to meet our housing element provisions so that we stay in compliance, this is still a question of importance that should have some merit, and we're happy to have that part of the broader context as well. And it just so happens that that context is being provided as we relate to this specific action we have before us tonight.
Okay, appreciate the clarification. Next question, under the requirements for the housing element in the state law, we listed multiple items that are required to make these lots or these parcels meet the guidelines. I do have just one general question regarding the parcels have to have access to adequate water and sewer supplies. Is there a distance requirement as far as how close the utility services have to be to that parcel? Or is it just has to be serviceable by that utility entity?
Commissioner Judge, through the chair. So that answer potentially could depend on who you ask. There are probably some individuals that say, well, that means it needs to be directly adjacent to, like within, rock's throw away. The county has looked, because we don't manage water, because we're located next to a whole bunch of existing cities that, and again, this is part of my overall frustration with this process in its entirety, is every law is making it harder and harder for unincorporated Kern County to develop any type of land, commercial, residential, everything along those lines. There are new provisions about vehicle miles traveled. There's new provisions on emissions. There's new provisions on everything that goes forward. And I am continually frustrated, and have expressed that frustration to the state, that here every state law is telling me as a local planner that development really needs to go in cities. But yet you are simultaneously giving me a RENA number of 21,000. Well, again, that kind of comes through the COG, but this number, and you're telling me, county, you have to, in your unincorporated areas, have this housing available for these individuals and, to prevent. So in my opinion, there is some confliction here that goes through. Here I have one law that says this, but yet you're making it very difficult on me to facilitate any of that. We have looked at a little bit broader perspective. Again, the county itself, unlike the city of Bakersfield and other areas, we don't manage water. There is not one project that gets water from the county of Kern. Therefore, when we came forward and we were looking at sites, we limited all of our sites to those areas in adopted existing serviceable areas from public services districts. In the Western Rosedale area, it's north of the river, and Rosamond, it's the Rosamond CSD. It is our belief that these projects are located within those areas and enough proximity to those areas that they are potentially serviceable. Again, a developer, when and if a site is proposed and they do want to move forward, will be responsible for meeting any of the provisions and requirements of that various agency. So, for example, if the water line is, let's just say it's 1,000 feet away, I don't know what it is, that applicant would be required to extending that water line to the project site so that that jurisdiction will provide a will-serve letter. Again, in concept, to the extent the county can do it, we believe that these sites qualify as an area available for water infrastructure and is within the extent over which I have overall control on. And so that is why they were identified before your commission this evening. Or at least that's how the analysis went in our minds as we were. Oh,
Okay,
mine's
what
back
about
on.
now? There we're back. Okay. Thank you, PG&E. So with that being said, even if some of these do get into high density modification, there is no guarantee they're going to be developed based upon these guidelines, because the developer, who they might be, will have to get these services provided and have to bear the cost to bring those utilities to that property. That's my understanding, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Now, we do believe that they are developable sites.
Yes.
And again, they are identified sites that meet those provisions of what we're required to do, and they meet all those criteria. But yes, if you're talking about the nuts and bolts answer, the developer will ultimately be responsible for that. And just like any other type of case, it is their responsibility to ensure that they are providing the adequate services and have the required will-serve letters.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And apologize on my question. I just trying to get as much clarification as possible on this evening. I was a little confused on the understanding between, if you could clarify, the lot size allowance for at least 16 units versus the zoning allowance of 20 units per acre. Can you please clarify on that?
Commissioner Judge, through the chair, that specifically has to identify with the sites that we're bringing forward. So if I bring a site that is so small that they can't even at least get 16 units on it, it couldn't be considered for the housing as it is itself. But again, I also have the requirement that, so again, when you look at density, if you have a site, that's a per net acre. If I have a site smaller than 1 acre, then clearly I would never say to any developer, oh, you have to develop 20 units even though you only have 3/4 of an acre site. However, what that 16 unit provisions means is I can't bring forward, or I shouldn't say I can bring forward, but the state won't count a site that can't have at least 16 units built on it. And again, I'm actually glad you asked that question, because I would like to provide a clarification, because if you do look at our information, some of the sites, we have 4 sites that we put under one project. What that has been done, and they're smaller acres. Again, the county allows, for purposes of zoning, people to build across property lines. Therefore, what we did in some areas that we believed were appropriate for higher density development, they're appropriate if all 4 of those parcels together move forward. And so they were presented to your commission as an overall potential project site, because the parcels either touch each other or located in the area where it made sense that if someone were to develop, they could develop all 3 or all 4 of those parcels. So again, I had not mentioned that in my presentation. That is what that meant. But to answer your specific question, any site I bring forward has to be of sufficient size to at least accommodate a total of 16 units to be accounted towards our housing requirements and our shortfall.
Thank you for that. The next question I had, I think you might address this because of the continuance of some of the lots you mentioned, but the point being that only 10 acres dependent on a site is allowable against the usage for the requirement. So is that my understanding why these are be continued? So you're looking to look at those other larger parcels to see if they should be 10 acres only or how that would go against our element?
Sure. Thank you again, Commissioner Judge, for that question. So when I have talked to the state, what they tell me is, well, if you're going to propose anything large, 20 acres, 25 acres, who knows what it could be, their provision is you need to show me evidence that somebody somehow built communities and built developments at that sufficient size and at that locations. And so, again, it is so varied in terms of what, it's so site specific. It's so subject to where existing lines are. To ensure that I am bringing proposals to the state that make sense, we're concerned about bringing an overall site because they may not think that any of that land is sufficiently, that there's not sufficient evidence to say that all 20 acres or all 30 acres or what, could be counted towards meeting that overall housing. Additionally, with this further clarification that they have said, no, you should be having a minimum density, and in all the review of the comments that we've received, again, when staff brought this forward initially, we did it based on a parcel size. I did not have anybody specifically go out, and not all of these sites were identified by project applicants that could go have a surveyor go say, survey and get a legal description for 6 acres, 10 acres, whatever it was. So when we started this process, again, it was a starting point. We used the entire parcel. Clearly based on ongoing compliance with the state and our conversations, concerns raised by residents, we want to make sure that if we are recommending any R3 zoning at a site that's greater than 10 acres, that we have had that second look and that we go through so that lets us try to really go down and look at the concerns and questions that were raised and determine whether or not staff really thinks that we should propose to your commission and ultimately the board an entire site more than 10 acres be rezoned at that R3 level. And so, yes, that is part of the reason why we are recommending the continuance. We do anticipate and still plan on having all those projects that we're recommending come back for your commission, but we are going to go through a specific review because of the overall size of those requests. And we just think that that's appropriate given the comments that we have received and our ongoing discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Chairman McGivney, and that's the end of my questions. Now I'll hold my rest so comments after public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Judge. Do you have any other commissioners wishing to question staff? I just had a couple quick questions for you, Mr. Murphy. You talk about 16 units per acre. I know the limit, is the limit 29? Is that what we're talking about?
Chairman McGivney, through the chair, the 16 units is making sure that a project site is of sufficient size to at least let 16 units be on it. The zoning and the R3 zoning would allow, by right, up to 29 dwelling units per acre. Now, again, there's a lot of things that go into that. They have to take out areas for roadway dedications. They have easements that may be on a property. They have roadways and they have parking things that have to be identified. But overall, it allows for the maximum of 29 units per net acre. Again, what this provision I'm talking about regarding 20 is the state coming and saying, no, not only can have a maximum, which is great, you need to have a minimum. None of our zone districts currently have a minimum zoning requirement. Historically, we have said, hey, we have a maximum. You could build up to 29 units per net acre. But in general, our R1, our R2, our R3 zone districts, they don't have minimums. The state, on Monday, made it abundantly clear to me that this provision says you need to have minimums, and it's our responsibility as the local jurisdiction to make whatever changes are necessary to ensure that the project sites that we need to meet our housing shortfall meet that requirement of having that minimum provision. And so that is why I mentioned that, as a component to this, which we'll be bringing back before any of these items are ever considered by your board, I would imagine we'll be bringing it forward to your commission on August 11th, are potential revisions to Section 1922, which is our R3 zoning ordinance district, where we can specifically propose those so that your commission can establish that, because that is something the state identified to me as something that is required.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And then my other question was, as far as a lot of these projects being in and around the Bakersfield area, do we have an alignment with the city of Bakersfield on these projects? or cases?
Chairman McGiffney, no. I can tell you that I talked to the planning director for the city of Bakersfield, and they didn't necessarily have any overarching concerns with any of these proposed uses. There's a lot of projects that are located adjacent to the city and the county. Our lines are very unusual. What it comes down to it in general is county is responsible for whatever we have in unincorporated, and the city is responsible for whatever they have in their city's jurisdiction. So, I know we coordinate a lot when it comes to roadway dedications, or when it comes to, hey, you have this project, they need to build the roadway. If that roadway is the city's jurisdiction, the requirement to build the roadway potentially still requires. So, again, no official agreement. I can tell you that I had a conversation with the planning director, and they said, well, no, in general, we understand what you're doing, and, they were not specifically opposed to us going through this process.
Because my next question would be about annexation and things of that nature. So I just wanted to be sure that this would meet our needs and not have any conflict in that regard.
Chairman McGiffney, it would meet our needs. Again, annexation, and it is its own separate process. And through that, the city of Bakersfield, or any incorporated city, it could be Arvin, it could be a number of other jurisdictions, they establish their own zoning districts for what they think it should be designated for. And if a project ever is incorporated, they go through that particular process. They are not necessarily beholden to what I have zoned. They go through their own consideration if they have items that are pre-zoned or whatnot. Clearly if something is built, that's a different story. But for vacant lands, again, that is a completely separate process. But to answer your questions, for purposes of meeting our need, I have unincorporated Kern County to worry about at this moment. And if it's in unincorporated Kern County, there's no guarantee that it would or would not be annexed, and so it would meet my needs, to my understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I just didn't want the process to go through and all of a sudden, oh, we have annexation, then you have to find something else. That was my main concern.
Sorry, one more to comment on that. There was a project that I actually didn't realize was in the process of being annexed, and the city contacted us, and then I reviewed and looked at it and said, oh yeah, it was not on your list now. One of the reasons it's not on your list is because it was currently going through an annexation process, and so staff removed that item for consideration by your commission.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for a thorough job, and I appreciate your comments on that. Do I have any other comments from the board? No, if not, I'd like to open this up to public comment. Because we have a lot of people, we're going to have a 2-minute limit, and I'd also ask if we could, if you have similar comments to someone about a specific project in that area, please, we don't have to go through the whole thing again. If you could just do that and make it brief at that point, it'd be helpful to get everybody's comments through tonight. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So if that's the case, let's please do that and give everybody an opportunity to speak about. There's a lot of projects to speak specifically. So if you're going to come up, please, come to the front. I appreciate that. The back, it's kind of dark, so I can't always see people, and I don't try to miss people, but it does happen. And then please be able to state your name, spell your name, for the clerk can record it. And then, like I said, we'll have 2 minutes here for each person. And I know we have a lot of people here again. Please be patient. We'll try to get through everybody in a timely manner. Thank you very much. With that, we'll start our public comments.
Hello, my name is Ryan Nance, RYANNANCE, and I'm a carpenter. My address is 3001 Woodglen Drive. I'm speaking on items 1 through 37. So we're discussing zone changes, specifically residential zone changes, which add value to the land. And when we add value to the land, the developers make a profit, to be sure, but residential carpenters, the one that actually build out the land, are some of the lowest paid in our industry. To make matters worse, we contend with traveling workers underbidding our local carpenters. We need local hire requirements. If a significant percentage of the construction workforce is dispatched from a state-certified training center within 75 miles of a job site, that is local hire. Therefore, we ask the commissioners to continue this item until such a time that the Board of Supervisors has had a chance to review the pros and cons of requiring local hire percentages on these projects. Thank you.
Good evening, staff and commissioners. My name is George Torres, Jorgetorres. My address is 10513 Point Royal Drive, Bakersfield. And I'm speaking on items 1 through 37. I'm a member of the Southwest Carpenters. The massive Amazon facility, nearly complete in Northwest Bakersfield, had no local hire requirements. Amazon decided to use a drywall contractor from the state of Georgia. This contractor brought their entire workforce from Georgia, flying them in every single weekend. We've seen what business does without requirements. Let's talk about a way to solve that problem. Local hire requirements can mitigate transportation and greenhouse gas impacts by minimizing vehicle miles traveled. And in this case, it could have eliminated airplane miles altogether. We need local hire requirements. If a significant percentage of the construction workforce is dispatched from a state-certified training center within 75 miles of a job site, that is local hire. Therefore, we ask the commissioners to continue this item until such a time that the Board of Supervisors has had a chance to review the pros and cons of requiring local hire percentages on these projects. Thank you.
Good evening, staff, members of the commission. My name is Josh Taylor, Taylor. I live at 4513 Diet Avenue, and I'm a member of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, speaking to the Kern County Housing Element Implementation, all items included. I've lived in Kern County my whole life, and I represent over 4,700 carpenters of the local 661. This housing element implementation is a large-scale zone change, and what your commission decides tonight will have a big impact on Kern County taxpayers. The American Lung Association's State of the Air 2016 report found Bakersfield's air to be the worst in the United States, and local hire requirements help mitigate those construction-related transportation greenhouse gas impacts by minimizing those vehicle miles traveled. Now, the county would benefit greatly from local hire requirements if a significant percentage of a given project's construction workforce is dispatched from a state-certified training center within 75 miles of that job site, again, defining that as local hire. This decision affects many future and potential projects at once, and there has not been sufficient time to formally make our request to the Board of Supervisors. Therefore, we ask the commissioners to continue this item till such a time that the board has had a chance to review the pros and cons requiring local hire percentages on these sites and future potential projects prior to the commission making a recommendation on these items. Thank you.
Good evening, staff. My name is Dennis Rankin, DENISRANKIN. I live on Rosewood Avenue. I have 4 properties on the southern border of the project going in. This is our 3rd time here. The last time we were here and got delayed again, you promised us that we would be heard tonight. And now we're at our 4th time that's going to get delayed. I would ask that you would let us know at the beginning of the meeting who is going to be heard tonight, who is going to get delayed. I'm here for number 20 on the list. I heard recommendation that it be postponed, but I haven't heard that we are being postponed. And if it is, I would ask that we be put on the front of the list to be heard next time at the next meeting. That'd be the 4th time that we've been delayed. I don't think it's right to put us off this long, but I do agree with you staff having another look at the 10-acre parcels and the high-density housing. So hopefully can we make sure that we get pulled at the front of the list next time for us that have been here for the 4th time for 4 delays.
Sir, you can speak on number 20 right now. There's nothing stopping you.
It's not going to be heard tonight, though, is it?
We're hearing you now.
But you're going to hear us again on the April, right? In August 11th?
Chairman McGivney, just to provide some overall clarification. So the commission has the authority to recommend approval. They don't have to continue it. They could deny it. They could do a lot of different things. So the item is being considered tonight. Staff is just simply recommending that at this time, those items we identified be continued. But the item is on the agenda, and the commission can make a decision. They may not want to continue it. That's part of what this whole process is. So I do recommend you provide your comments so that they could have that understanding, or whether that is the case.
Well, I was under the impression that we were going to be late as your staff comment. But, well, my house has been ran into 7 times since 2000. My fence has been hit 7 times. I have 40 railroad ties in my front yard in front of my bedroom right now to stop cars from coming into my bedroom on Rosewood Avenue. I had a young man on a motorcycle die in my arms as a wreck from a guy coming down Rosewood and getting into an accident. And this young man had just served 2 tours and came back only to die in a car wreck in front of my house. There's too much traffic now. There's only 2 roads going into that development right now, and that'd be Rosewood and Shalane. Neither one of them have stoplights, and neither one of them have crosswalks. We have 5 schools in the neighborhood, and all these kids are running across streets with no sidewalks and no crosswalks whatsoever at all. I talked to East Niles Water Community District. They said they don't have the infrastructure to supply this sewer system or water to this project. I understand that they will have to be paid for by the project developers. But there's just way too much traffic now. And all we are surrounded with right now is all brick walls. All we have is graffiti from one end of our neighborhood to the other because all the artists that live in our neighborhood have been supplied with all these brick walls that they can just go up and down. And there's nothing to do, nothing to stop, no way to stop them. And there's no parks around. The only park close to this project is Hillcrest Memorial, and I don't think they want to go there. And there is no shopping centers within walking distance. The bus does not come out. Get bus does not go out to this project. My houses are going to be developed. The southern border is 1/2 of my property. So when you go to Rosewood Avenue, the southern border of this project, I own 2 houses on the 8701 and 8717. The parking is already outrageous. My neighbors park all over. There's no parking to be left over. And the offsite parking at this job is going to be, apartments always have a lot of offsite parking problems. So I'm just asking you, please just take another look at the project. There's no infrastructures around. There's no shopping centers. The only thing that's close to this project is liquor stores. And you know how that works out with the high density housing. So I'm just asking you this time, please do not okay this project. The traffic, we cannot take the traffic and the noise and pollution and everything else.
Okay, thank you. And I think if you wish to speak to staff, because if this is continued, if you wish to speak to staff, there will be opportunity for you to do that. So that at least time is in your favor in that regard. So I want you to know that. So yeah, and unfortunately we have to go through these processes legally and otherwise, and that's when the meetings are. And we appreciate everybody coming out to these, but it's just a process we have to go through and make sure we have enough people here to do that.
The ones that get pushed back the most should be put to the front of the list, I believe, on your next agendas. This would be the fourth delay for us.
No, understand, and there were reasons for that, but also this whole thing is coming up as you see these cases. So this is all being considered as one consideration. So all the cases. So that's just the process here. So, but if you're definitely welcome to come back, you're definitely welcome to talk to staff. You know, if indeed this is continued. So I just want to let you know that does happen, and we do take your comments very seriously. Okay.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank
And
you very much.
we do apologize for the delays. As you can see, we have a missing commissioner here, so we've had.
Is there any way you could do a vote on what you're going to delay so the people that are here on those 25 projects that aren't going to be heard tonight?
We're going to try to hear everybody. I guarantee you that. So just a 2-minute limit's helpful in that regard.
Hello, my name is Kara Costamagna, Costamagna. My address is 3750 Nord Avenue. I'm talking specifically about number 32. I know you saw a revision to that map. I had some of my own paperwork, but I wanted to address some of Mr. Murphy's comments. For one, he started off with talking about emissions and trips and how we have things in place to kind of offset that. I am well aware of environmental compliance. It's something I do. Specifically, I don't think offsets is an adequate way to kind of account for those emissions. You can actually go to CalEnviro Screen Hub to the 4.0 map and pull up our tracked map, and you could see that our exposures to ozone, PM 2.5, and even diesel particulate matter are quite high. Although our map is green, like we would be healthy, our neighbor who has those same environmental exposures, they are red. Now, the reason why they are red is because, unfortunately, they have sensitive populations, which is cardiovascular disease, low birth weight, asthma, and socioeconomic factors. But these maps you will see side by side on that website in the new 4.0 map that was released October 21st. And again, our emissions exposures where we are higher than our neighbor, okay? So in saying that, when you talk about offsets, you mentioned the Multifamily units have 7 trips per family. The 10 acres you propose, they've already sent out a plan for 210 units. 210 units would be 1,470 trips a day. Our Albertsons is almost 4 miles away from our location, and that's kind of the fancy supermarket. I have 4 children who I've been able to raise here in Bakersfield. I have to shop at Winco. That's 8 miles. Of the 4 children, 3 of which are adults, and they all have to share a car. So there's a whole lot of people driving because we work and go eat a lot of food. There's 6 of us. But in saying that, the average household, according to Data USA, is 2 cars per family. So imagine all the cars there. So I wanted to bring that up. The other
Thank
thing,
you.
huh? Is that 2 minutes? I got 44 seconds.
No, that's over 46 seconds.
Oh gosh, I had so much more. Can I get back in line?
Sorry about that. Trying to get everybody in here tonight, people, so thank you for your patience.
Greg Davis, DAVIS, 2113 Olympic Drive. And I want to approach the people about number 31, the lot at southeast corner of East Highland and Bedford. That property has been vacant for a long time, I understand, but it is a natural habitat for kit fox. There's kangaroo rats, there's raccoons and possums. I know probably no environmental impact been run on it, but also there's the Golden Bear Refinery on Manor that also faces that property, and I would argue the point about people being mischievous and crime-ridden in public areas such as that. What I'm trying to say is most of the people that live in that area are absolutely against it. So, do I come back on August the 11th for the planning department, another hearing on this? Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to provide a response?
He asked you, so sure, why not?
Okay. It's dependent on what the commission does tonight. So we need to wait, go through public testimony, and then the commission will make a recommendation. And that will depend on what happens with your particular case today.
So August the 11th, we come back.
Well, if the commission does that tonight. Again, once we go through our public comments, the commission will discuss this project, and they'll make a decision.
How will we be notified?
Well, we have to see what happens tonight first.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Linda Irby, IRBY. I live at 16226 Blake Island Court, Bakersfield 93314. I'm here opposing the implementation on item number 33, the northeast corner of Rosedale Highway and Weegis Avenue rezoned from suburban residential 1 to high-density residential R3. I have collected almost 300 signatures opposing the rezoning. The staff report, the California Public Resource Codes indicates these will be a possibly income-based apartments. Page 25 abstract states between the 2 lots, there will be close to 1,100 units over the 38 acres by the calculation by at least 3 stories. For California Code 21159.24, the project cannot contain more than 100 residential units. The change of the developments from suburban residential to high-density residential will extremely increase traffic of all kinds. Our area is not developed for the amount of increase. Per the Planning Department, development of the area comes after the build. We have seen much development has occurred within new homes in our area over 20 years. The progress has been minimal. For the same code, the project must be within an urbanized area. We are not urban. We are semi-rural. A majority of the area surrounding the project are fields and orchards. Farm roads exist all around us. Many of the Northwest developments have equestrian trails. It is not uncommon to see kit foxes, coyotes, snakes, raccoons, possums, and skunks. These are things that you typically do not see in town, especially on a regular basis. Residents own chicken, horses, cows, pigs, mules. A few weeks back, a kit fox ran in front of me in the direction location of the field of the proposed project. The nearest grocery, convenience store, fast food, bank is 5 miles. Nearest hospital is 8. Nearest high school is almost 8 miles. If you were in town to drive to the nearest essential store or gas station, the nearest park is 2 miles with no way for children to travel safely by foot or bike. Speaking within residents near the Silver Oaks Park and already have major issues has been brought to the attention of the Parks Department to no avail. Rosedale is not being expanded. It's a 2-lane west of Allen. Currently, stoplights from Jenkins to Renfro to Heath are backed up from traffic from light to light, especially during the holiday weekends. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 changing of lights to get through each stoplight. Semis are still heavily using Rosedale and not the West Park Freeway. They are even using the back roads coming from Santa Fe Road as I pass through. There are no turn lanes for business along Rosedale west of Jenkins. Leaving traffic backed up, pedestrians are crossing Rosedale, dodging traffic. So many near misses, yet these red flags continue to be ignored. Regis is currently a farm road. The developer is only responsible for updating the roads immediately affecting the new development. There are areas of Regis and surrounding roads that barely one car can pass through.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Commissioner McGiffey, I apologize, but can we try sticking to the 2 different timeline?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately,
I'm sorry.
because we have a lot of speakers, and I would request if you might try making that a pretty mandate. That's my request. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Travis Harless, Harless. I live at 16610 Keystone Place, 93314. That's the Manorwood development off Meacham and Regis. A couple concerns that have already been addressed, property value, roads, but I'll cut straight to the chase, is crime. The increase in crime we'll see in our neighborhood. Low income and government subsidized housing areas have more property crime and violent crime than other areas. I can't get into this socioeconomic reasons for this, but I can say for certain that increased crime is a reality that we deal with in these types of housing projects. This is not a moral judgment against the majority of good people who utilize these services. This is just a statement of fact about the disproportionate number of criminals who live in government housing. Since the passing of Prop 47 in 2014, we have seen a huge increase in the number of criminals on our streets. Many of those criminals will certainly end up in these new housing developments. The Sheriff's Office does not have the deputies they need to effectively patrol this area. They routinely have only 5 deputies to cover all of Rosedale, Oildale, East Bakersfield, and South Bakersfield. Since Rosedale is lowest crime proportion of the metro zone, it gets the least amount of attention. In the 5 months we have lived here, I have never seen a deputy in the area. This is not an attack on our understaffed Sheriff's Department. This is just another statement of fact about the reality on the ground. These low-income families have no protection from these criminals. The Sheriff's Department will not be able to prevent crime, provide justice to the victims, which will cause a criminal free-for-all on the western outskirts of Bakersfield. I ask that you please vote against the measure to protect my family and the families in these low-income housing services. Specifically commenting on items number 32 and number 33. Thank you.
My name is Jay Crossland, C-R-O-S-L-I-N. I live at 14,000 Westdale Drive. I'm addressing item number 35. Start out by addressing some of the things that was mentioned here, the privacy. There's approximately 16 or 17 homes that are zoned E, and we're half acres. That would impact our privacy immensely. It's already 2 couples that just recently bought said they would not have bought there if they knew that apartments were going in. Traffic will increase greatly because all of those people have to come down Westdale to go to the grammar school, which is at the end of Westdale. So the traffic would be extremely heavy there. And there's already a lot of people from out of the area come down that street. In my letter, I addressed the crime that's already there. There's a trailer park there that the crime is very intense. We have break-ins all the time on Westdale, and the police helicopters are constantly going over. So to increase the low-income housing in that area is an overkill in our area. and we would like to oppose this. And as far as mixed neighborhoods, you know, we talk, it would become almost a slum immediately with a bunch of apartments next to the trailer park that gives us all of the crime problems. And one of the things too, because of the length of that property and the kids going to school, we have had problem with the trailer park toward the ends going over our fences and going to school. And they would be tempted to do that because they have to go a quarter of a mile to Jenkins and then back down. So it saves them a half mile if they cut through our properties. So I ask that you disapprove rezoning that to the R3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Archer. I live in District 1. My first concern is that this is a large-scale change to the general plan. The general plan was just updated in 2020 and included workshops with the public to plan for 2040. This motion ignores that plans and initiates a change in the texture of the surrounding neighborhoods. For instance, a new R3 parcel surrounded by agriculture would require additional updates to the general plan to provide services to ensure thoughtful development in the future. Shouldn't the public be able to provide input on that development? My second concern is that the Planning Commission with this action doesn't seem to hold the planning department and staff to the same standard and level of scrutiny that it would hold a developer or member of the public. Would you allow a developer to present 36 zone changes across 61 parcels throughout the county in one action item? Each of these parcels is different. Some are currently zoned agriculture, others are R2, estate, or mobile home park. They're adjacent to different types of properties as well, which present different development concerns. One property is located in a pocket that's surrounded by the city of Bakersfield, which would typically be annexed as a condition of development. By providing a by right zoning of R3 allows for structures up to 4 stories with a 5-foot rear and side yard setback. My request is for the Planning Commission to require these zone changes to be presented individually so that you can address specific problems of the public and create conditions to the developer. These conditions may include lower density or height restrictions adjacent to incompatible zoning. This is not a matter of pitting the property owner's rights against their neighbors. It is ensuring that the County Planning Department facilitates careful planning and expansion within our communities. Thank you for your time, and I hope you can make a thoughtful decision.
Kirk Moore. I live on 13912 Westdale Drive. I'm going to comment on Proposal 35. I live a couple doors down from Jay. First, I haven't studied it a great deal. I'm not sure how big that lot is. Does anybody can tell me real quick how many acres that lot is on Jenkins and Rosedale? 10? That's 200 minimum multi-residents. I don't think you should put that on Rosedale Highway. Several accidents have been over there. There's the trailer park, which Jay mentioned. And next to that is Vice, or next to that's a little liquor store, not a real big one, or not a liquor store, a grocery store. Not a real high-end grocery store. Not a lot of parking there in front. There's a lady that recycles cans, takes your cans, and she's in the back of that liquor store. And I think the traffic and kids and pedestrians walking on Rosedale Highway to either get down there to McDonald's or Albertsons or get over there to the liquor store or the grocery store and the can place. I think that poses a big risk. There's only two lanes there in front of and besides, I hadn't even thought of what he talked about with the kids having to go to school, coming down Jenkins and traffic going down Westdale to get to the elementary school. Anyway, by that trailer park, there's a pretty good sized lane there. It's not developed. It's just, you can pull over there and drive on it and turn left or right on Jenkins. But then after the trailer park, it narrows down to 2 lanes, and that's where they have a bottleneck. And I really don't think you should put a high density residence right there on Rosedale. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. Richard Walker, WALKER, agent for applicant of case number 8, which consists of 3 APNs 47302214, consisting of 19.6 acres, 47302215, 19.46 acres, and 47302216, consisting of 20.92 acres. Excuse me. Each of these APNs has the 5.1 high-density residential land use designation. Just so happens that each of these APNs currently has a mobile home park zoning designation, which is not a compatible zone under high-density residential. As such, this case number 8 and these 3 APNs is highly appropriately suited for this R3 upzoning effort, considering that the MP zoning is no longer compatible under HDR land use. Planning staff indicated that case number 8, as well as other cases, have been continued to August 11th so that planning can determine whether or not an R3 upzoning for these larger sites is realistic from a development standpoint. I would like to inform the commissioner, that the applicant for site case number 8 is currently processing a final map for a 178-unit multifamily residential project immediately north of the case number 8 site. As such, you cannot find a better applicant for this R3 upzoning and for fulfilling the goals and objectives of the housing element update. For those reasons, I am respectfully requesting that the commissioners add case number 8 to the list of cases to be approved tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Cynthia Calloway. I own 8929 East Wind Circle in the East Wind Estates off Kern Canyon Road. This is number 20. And I'm speaking on behalf of 115 plus people. I personally went door to door and got signatures against the R1 to R3 zone change as it states on the paperwork mailed out. A lot of these residents did not get the document due to community bail boxes being broken into, and they have yet been fixed. They haven't been fixed yet. Many can't make it due to age, disabilities, family issues, working 3 jobs, and so on. Okay. As a homeowner in the East Wind Estates, I purchased my lot. It faces south to the adjacent lots. I overlook the valley. My lot sits up. And if a 2 or 3 story apartment complex goes in, it's going to be obstruction of view for many homeowners in our East Wind Estates that purchased along that side. Let's see, where did I go? Okay, mountain range, blah, 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 as well as many others in East Wind Inn. We are not against the 4 lots in question staying zone, R1 zoning, which would be approximately 175 total single-family homes, depending on individual lot size. That would be about 350 plus 100 cars, family and friends cars, vehicles on location. That's 450 cars using the surrounding 3 outlet roadways, Shalane Avenue to Kern Canyon Road, which has no light at the location, stop sign only. Vehicles traveling Kern Canyon Road to State Highway 184 from east to west are traveling approximately 50-55 miles per hour. And the area has had many broadside accidents due to that issue already in the general area. Shalane Avenue to Rosewood Ave, State Highway 184 has stop signs only. Speeding vehicles is an issue already at hand in the area.
Sorry to interrupt you, but thank you.
Pardon me?
It's been 2.5 minutes.
It has? I gotta
Yeah.
get back in line. Dang.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Bishop, Jeannie, and the name Bishop, Bishop. I live at 9224 East Wind Circle, also representing number 20 on the list. I want to start out by saying I have great empathy for those who are in need of low-income housing. I work for the Housing Authority of the County of Kern, although I'm not here for them. I do work there, and I am very aware of the need for developing properties for low-income families. However, I'm here representing number 20 on the list here. The majority of the people who live in our little community are elderly. They moved there because it's a quiet area. Some of them have that south-facing view. Like I said, it's very quiet, very charming little community that we live in, which is why I wound up there. We wound up there. Kern Canyon, and so having that quietness of the neighborhood is going to go away if these development due south of us is developed, especially if it becomes 2 or 3 story apartments. So that calmness and that serenity will go away. I know that the staff report did mention something about crime rate. I do know for a fact that that is what happens in increase in crime rate. When the houses due south and slightly east of us were developed, single-family homes, there was an increase in people jumping over a fence line, tagging cars, tagging the walls, and breaking into cars and so forth. It finally did settle down over time, but that has already happened. We just recently got tagged on one of our common walls facing the highway, and then somebody else came along and quadrupled that on the other side of it, and it's costing us about $1,000 as an association to repair that and fix that. Also, the traffic issue is still an issue because of no traffic lights, and cars and vehicles are speeding along Kern Canyon Road constantly. I hear screeches all the time. Our daughter was in an accident because somebody wasn't paying attention about 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So bringing in that many...
Excuse me, it's about 2.5 minutes.
I'm sorry? Holy cow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. McGiffey, the chair, can we maybe point out to let people to keep an eye on that clock possibly so they understand their limits?
I thought they saw the clock, but I guess they don't.
People are people. They're going to do what we do. Again, Juan Reese, speaking on item 20. Question on the area not having access properly. If you see an overview of that area, there are limited accesses to it. And what I mean limited is you've got an area that bottlenecks up to existing houses right now that's at a strain. I moved there in 2010. The homes were built in 2007. The sewage in the area has not been revamped. Nothing's been updated. So as right now, the utilities are stressed. If we want to bring in the larger amount of people, I would like to see plans going forward that we're going to take care of the sewage for those of us that have been there. They are enduring problems when we moved in, and now you want to add more housing, and it's only going to jump onto our line. So if there's going to be any plans once this goes in, when we come back on the 11th, is there any way we can find out if there's any potential construction in the future to make an easement for the people who are there already? Because we are having sewage problems right now with the existing area. We were added on 10 years ago, and that stressed it. And now we're going to be adding a couple apartments more is what we're saying. But are we going to be, who do we go after then when we don't have proper sewage? When we don't have the proper water in the area? The service provider in that area, I know, is trying to get with the Mettler Water District right now. We're looking to be annexed. All that needs to be looked into. I would push for an annex myself because the area does need to be upgraded before we start adding people to the areas. So we shouldn't put people in areas who don't have the money to get out when they find out they made a mistake in finding themselves in a position and not having the money to cure it. I'll let the other people speak, and thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Russ Irby, RUSSIRBY, 16226 Blake Island Court. I'm not only being affected by one of them, number 33, but 32 and 35 also directly affect me. One of them's yards away, 33. The other one's right at 1 mile away, 32, and the other one is right at 2 miles away, 35. By adding these apartments, call them what they are, multi-resident, low income, whatever they are, to our area is greatly going to impact and hurt our roadways. It's not only going to hurt Rosedale, which Rosedale's a mess. Part of it, like they said, is 2-lane. The other part is wide enough to be 3 lanes, but since it was only developed for 2 blocks, it goes to 2-lane. And it won't happen, it won't change for the future. It'll continue to be the hodgepodge of 1-lane, 2-lane, 3-lane. Mr. Murphy stated that the county projected years ago the need for the homes. And off of that projection, I bought my home. I bought in an area that I did a lot of research on. The research was half-acre lots with quarter-acre lots surrounding me and in the area. Now, after I've lived there 11 years, you want to change the deck of cards and call it a new game. That's not fair to anybody that bought out there. We did our research. You guys need to do yours now. You need to go out there and you need to go beyond us into areas where people are not living and establish those as R3, and then let them do their due diligence. And I've got a lot more, but my time's up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, my name is Kara Costamagna again. I live at 3750 Nord Avenue. This is number 32. To go back to Mr. Murphy's points, his second point was privacy. This 10 acres is, we are the closest neighbor to this 10 acres. What separates us, our property, from this 10 acres is a 5-acre plot by north of the river. North of the river does not have a plan to develop this for 20 years. So even with an 8-foot or 10-foot brick wall on this 10 acres of 210 units multi-story, they would be able to, we would not have privacy. The other thing I want to bring up is about crime. Now, I don't like to think that we are saying that people that move into apartments are criminals or anything like that, but we do know when we have larger populations in smaller areas that even if someone wants to come in and commit crimes, they have a lot more people in an area to get it done. But I do want to point out that on the Kern County website right here, there is a flyer. It says state policies harm critical Kern program and essential services. You say that already, or not you, Kern County, Governor Newsom's policies negatively impact county revenue annually. We are saying right now, we are already $12.2 million down on fire, police, water, and other special district needs. So even if we develop these 10 acres with 210 units, is that enough to supplement the services we are gonna need for that area? We already have street racing, we already have theft through our mailboxes, we are already missing small SUVs, ATVs, the farming equipment we need for our property. The other thing I want to bring up is going back to the emissions. It's really important to understand you can go to Kern COG to get that information, which they do not have any plans for bike paths, sidewalks, or anything else for that area plan. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is John Gallen. John Gallen, 14335 Winchester Drive, Mojave, California. I'm here speaking about case number 1. I'm representing the 110 homeowners from Camelot Homeowners Association. For starters, we don't see that your map and your letter, as far as directions, are compatible, 1.2 versus 2.2 miles, just to point that out. Don't need to comment on high-density apartments. We see that in Mojave with the 3 developments that we have. Mojave's unincorporated. Trying to summarize this, everything that's been said tonight, if we were to draw an imaginary line around the community of Mojave, this rezoning that you're proposing is the farthest you could be for any type of development from any of the services. There's only one grocery store, Stater Brothers, post office, medical facility, park, schools are all on the east side of Mojave. In order to get to those facilities, we've seen a high level of pedestrian traffic from some of these developed apartments crossing several 8 or 10 railroad tracks. Highway 14, we've had a number of incidents there. For all intents and purposes, this is about the worst and the most distant location you could find to rezone and put any type of housing other than a single-family residence. Having said that, I'll thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tendai Mutunga. I'm the city planner for City of Arvin. I'm here on item 16, number 16, case number 8, I suppose. City of Arvin it applauds the county on all its efforts in trying to address its shortage in housing inventory. We are also doing the same thing. Our few concerns are addressed in the letter that was written to you on May 26, which I hope during your deliberations you take seriously into consideration. I should also mention that General Plan Amendment and Rezone does not provide a provision where they are categorically exempt from CEQA. CEQA must be taken into consideration, and I hope you will do that. That's all that I have tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rosario Padilla, R-O-S-A-R-I-O, Padilla, P-A-D-I-L-L-A, and I'm speaking on number 19. And I would just like to have everybody from my community raise their hand and thank them for coming to support this. I'd like to publicly present to you a petition from our community in opposition to the proposed zone change. I collected a total of 57 signatures of property owners in the area surrounding the proposed zone change. Remember, our area is low density, so although 57 signatures may not seem like a lot, it actually represents nearly everybody impacted by the proposed zone change. We stand unanimously against the proposed zone change. I won't go over all the other information. We submitted several letters, and I would just like to ask you guys to consider every little comment that was made in the letters. And I thank you so much.
If the clerk could go and get the petition. Amber, if you can go pick up the petition.
Get up.
Oh, you have a room. Oh, thank you.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Roberto Padilla at 5946 Moeller Road, R-O-B-E-R-T-O-P-A-D-I-L-L-A. The proposed rezoning in our community is uniquely extreme. From
Which topic are you talking about?
Oh, I'm
sir?
sorry, number 19.
Thank you.
Which is Moeller and Dorita.
Okay, thank you.
It's very uniquely extreme. It goes from low density rural residential estates to the highest possible density urban residential housing. And this would be done to an area that is nested in the center of our community. Our community is actually quite diverse, but one thing we all share in common is ownership or the rental of estate-sized properties. The estate designation allows for special uses like boarding horses, farming, and storing large farming equipment. And that, in fact, is how members of our area use their properties. One demographic that I want to bring to your attention tonight that is very attracted to the area are truckers. They like the larger properties because it allows them a safe place to park their semi that doesn't disturb neighbors. For example, one of our neighbors needs to run the cold storage on his semi overnight. This buffer that estates provide makes that possible without disturbing others. There's actually high demand by truckers and similar working class professionals for properties in our area. They are quickly swooped off the market, and our area is perfect for truckers. In my opinion, the area is really not well suited for the proposed zone change, high density. In your response to our concerns, Mr. Murphy, you promised that the area will have adequate water and sewage one day, that they'll fix our long neglected road that we maintain with our own resources one day, that the grocery stores and public services and recreation will come to the area one day. And I do believe that. I do believe they'll come one day. but our area is already perfectly well suited for rural residential estates and those who seek them, not one day, but today. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Erasmo Lopez. I am at 3908 Wainio Street, and I did present a letter that I didn't get to mail in, so he's going to provide it to you guys. He made a lot of good points. There's been a lot of good points this evening. I do disagree with the comment that property values. There's not enough evidence for to substantiate property values decreasing. I disagree with that. I don't think anyone here. The pattern here is nobody wants apartments or high density zoning next to their home. Okay, we do. I represent number 19. I don't think I said that. We do have large estates out there. We've worked hard for what we have. This is unusual for that pocket of proposed development or rezoning. It is divided by a road. The nearest water, I guess, for city or county or whoever the developer would have to tap into is probably the Mount Vernon wastewater. It's the closest one. I don't think he's going to do that. And the Mount Vernon waste facility, where they take in brush and trees and trash like that and recycle that, is about a mile away from this property. So I don't think we're going to get any luxury apartments coming into that area. So I disagree with that also. It's more likely than not that we're going to have Section 8 or lower income people coming into that area. So with that being said, I'd like the commissioners to not adopt this proposal. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, number 20. I addressed about the Cynthia Callaway, 8929 East One Circle. I addressed the landlocked issue of obstruction of view. Upon going to, I'm going to bypass all the other stuff. You have a copy of my letter in your docket. But I will say, going door to door at 120 plus signatures, they all stated they would rather see a park on those 4 lots. Park, small park, small skate park, small water park. There's nothing for all these new homes that have been built right there in that hole, in that little nest, for them to walk their children to. So I don't know how to oppose that, to get that, or to make it a proposal to possibly put a park there rather than
You talk to your supervisor. If it's a county property, you talk to your county supervisor.
And I believe I went up to Alicia Perez's office and addressed that issue, that it would be better for a park to be in that area.
You mean Letitia Perez?
Letitia, I'm sorry, yes.
Same person, that's why I'm sure we're talking the same person.
Yes. How long she's gonna be there, I don't know. How's this working out? But anyway, on behalf of everybody there, the 115 plus that I got signatures from, they were all against the R1 to R3. We already have a water issue on the East Niles Water District.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Good evening or good night, I guess. My name is Emma de la Rosa, and I'm the Regional Policy Manager with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. We work with residents in the community who are burdened by the substandard housing conditions that folks are currently facing and the unavailability of affordable housing and housing in general. We continuously get calls of folks who are facing evictions, who don't have a place to go. I appreciate the percentage of the vacancy rate. That's honestly true, and I can tell you that residents are facing a hardship. So we're here today to encourage the Planning Commission to vote to recommend the Board of Supervisors approve the rezoning. That is the first step requested to bring the county back into compliance with the state housing element law. The rezone program is a result of dedicated staff time to determine the sites that will both meet the requirements of state law and address the shortage of affordable housing and housing in general in the county. The county, just like the rest of the state, has a critical need for housing, and the sites that permit high-density housing allow an economy of scale that can support affordable housing development. Although not all of these sites will actually develop, they will not actually develop as affordable housing, the identification of these sites is the first step in facilitating housing to meet the needs of all income groups in the community. Moreover, it is the county's duty to affirmatively further fair housing in the community, in the county. Complying with this rezone obligation is the first step, again, to fulfilling its responsibility. State law required the county to rezone 218 acres back in 2015 and 2016. We are finally now in the place where the county is finally fulfilling its obligation with housing law to rezone the land. The actions necessary to implement programs 2.2.2 and 2.2.3, as well as actions to fulfill several other programs, were not completed in a timely manner. By 2021, the county had failed to fulfill these requirements, and the Department of Housing and Community Development found that the county's amended land inventory of its housing element failed to meet the requirements of state law in November 2021. Since November 2021, the county worked to identify viable sites for future potential development, ensuring that the sites were suitable and actually available for development as required by Government Code 655583, and also dispersed throughout the county to increase housing opportunities in each community. I know I'm over time, so I will end. So we strongly recommend approval of the rezone program as a first step to bring the county back into compliance with the housing law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I think it's for all the apartments. Anyway, sounds like Wes. But my name is Xavier Reyes. Last name is Reyes, and I'm speaking on number 19. There's a number that was read that we're going to be excused or not excused, but we're never excused. So until August 11th. So we had some people speak on this 19.
Yeah, we've had a number of people speak about 19. Actually.
Yeah. So I guess we just follow the line. But on 19. We bought some property there in 89, and then 91, 92, we moved into this house. There's been some, of course, there's changes in life, but so far there's one high school, one junior high, and 2 elementary schools. Now, not even a mile and a half away from our home, and there's usually 45 minutes in the morning and 45 minutes in the afternoon, either going back and forth that you have to travel a certain time or take a different route. The other route that you might skip, the 45 minutes in the morning or 45 minutes in the afternoon, you have to go all the way to Mueller and then hit Whippatch and then hit 58 if you work inside town. But traffic is just horrible out there at the same time. And now you guys want to build build apartments. At this time, they're building houses. They're building houses across the street from Miramonte High School, which is going to impact more traffic. And that's designed in front of Fairfax, which is Mueller and Red Bank. It's a 2-lane back and forth. So more houses built across, and now you want to build houses about a mile away from the high school. It's going to be more impact. The crime thing, property value, that's another issue. But the impact of the traffic. Now they're doing a high school on Cottonwood and Panama Lane. They're doing a junior high across the street, Panama Lane and Cottonwood. So all this area within 3 or 4 or 5 miles, you have two high schools, you have a junior high, 2 junior highs, and you have 3, 4 elementary schools. So consider that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Chairman. My name is Kyle Newland, K-Y-L-E. Last name is Newland, N-E-W-L-E-N. I live at 3434 South Sterling. I'm talking on number 19. I directly border this building in the middle of what you guys are wanting to propose. I love where I live. I moved there for a reason. We're R5, very big estates there. I love the dirt. I love the dust. We raise horses, we raise pigs, we raise sheep, we raise chickens. We rope, we plow our fields, we do everything. Guess what I'm gonna do tonight? I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna start my tractor, I'm gonna plow my field because it's cooler tonight and I've been here all evening. So what I wanna talk about is I remember I used to live at 4009 Mason Marin, and that was over by the old racing track. And I remember when I moved into that place, everybody was really proud as punch that they shut down. They were able to make a big enough nuisance of themselves to shut down the racetrack. I love racing. I love loud cars. My neighbors start their cars up, 40 acres away, and I can hear it, and I love it. But they're proud that they shut them down, once they built those houses around Mesa Marin. Now, with R3 coming in, there's going to be 540 units, potentially 540 units. That outnumbers our 57 signatures that Miss Rosie gained for us. So that means that they're the majority. So they push people like me out. I love the dirt. I love being in the dust. I love roping. I love riding my motorcycles around my property. And I'm really scared that that's going to influence why I moved out there, to raise animals with my children, to teach my children animal husbandry, to teach my children how to live, off grid. But as far as the trips go, as traffic, everybody's talked about traffic. It's 3784. More trips on a one-lane road of Fairfax going by all the schools, like Mr. Harvey said. That's my time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Hello again. My name is Erasmo Lopez, 3908 Wayneo Street. I want to bring something up, and this is for number 1 through 37. We all know we're straining the Kern County Sheriff's Department. They're desperately trying to fill positions. The police department is trying to fill positions. We all know this is going to create more crime, okay, for these areas. These areas are probably not even patrolled right now because they don't need it. Some of them maybe, some of them are not. Ours isn't. It's unusual for us to see a sheriff car coming down the street, a highway patrolman, or well, of course, we're not going to see a BPD. However, the shortfall that he's talking about and trying to fill this thing all at once because of this housing element, I mean, isn't there a way of special circumstances you can say, look, we don't even have the infrastructure in our law enforcement for the community of Bakersfield. So if we start getting, these apartments, that doesn't mean people are going to move out of their house, the son or the daughter is going to move out and go live in an apartment. It's only going to invite more people, the population growth. Okay, I think that's a very good point. I think that's something you guys should consider. I think he should consider it. I think maybe request a special circumstances and give us a few years to fill our law enforcement, build it up so we can handle this increase in population, because that's what we're going to do. We all know we have an immigration problem right now. Where are they going to go? Okay, next thing we know, they're next door. Okay, so I think we should really take a look at that. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Honorable Planning Commissioners. I'm Whitney Jackson with McIntosh & Associates, and I'm here on behalf of our clients who are the landowners for number 33. My client's family has homesteaded the land here for many generations, and they do not wish to develop low-income housing. They live in the area. They drive past this site every day. They want a beautiful community, and they want to provide this for their commute as well. My clients recognize the current and future housing needs, both statewide and locally, and they're committed to developing housing to meet those needs and goals. The future development will address issues and goals of the Western Rosedale Specific Plan and the Metropolitan Bakersfield General Plan in regards to visual character, roadway expansion, improved circulation, infrastructure, and organization of land uses. I wanted to comment on a few of the neighbors' comments that were brought up from Linda in particular. She discussed traffic, and we just wanted to let you know that the streets will be improved per county standards. Rosedale Highway will be widened, and they will do biological surveys before developing anything on the land. I know she mentioned kit foxes. They're all over town. They've had them at Cal State, Bakersfield. They're not just in the rural areas. There's also blunt-nosed leopard lizards on the east side of town. So that will be addressed prior to any development. As far as crime, it's not going to be government housing. It's not going to be low end, and high density does not just necessitate crime in general. And The roadways will have improved circulation. And as far as fire and sheriff services go, they pay fees. So the developer will pay fees to actually improve and increase these services going out to the site. And school fees would also be paid to help address the school districts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do have a question since the response was directed at me.
Please, this is a public hearing. You already spoken, I believe, at length.
Sorry.
Hello, good evening. My name is Daniel Majid, last name Majeed. I'm speaking on behalf of the area of the area of 33 and 32. The area that I'm speaking specifically of, I live kind of in between both proposed areas, and the main concern is what was already addressed with other issues of higher density, higher traffic, higher pollution, things like that, is the main reason why my wife and I have recently bought and built a house out there 6 months ago was because we wanted to get away from the busy areas of Bakersfield, as most of the parts of Bakersfield are being built up pretty rapidly. We lived on the southwest area by Panama and Ash, and that area is greatly booming with many housing, many apartments, and while the crime and stuff does increase with increased population, it's only a given. It's not the increased population or the people that are causing the crime, it's more of the population density. So the reason why we moved out to the other side of town was to avoid all of that. We loved that most of the houses out there were half-acre or 1 acre homes. Lower density equals less traffic, less crime, and so that's what we wanted. Had we known that it was gonna be higher density, higher apartments out there, would it have adjusted our influence? Maybe. Would it have maybe caused us to think, oh, the price we pay for this area is a little too expensive now that there's going to be this increased population out there? I know that a lot of the homes out there are very large estate homes. They're very luxurious, expensive homes. And to have higher density apartments, whether it's going to be low income or it's going to be a mixed income, it kind of defeats the purpose of why these people purchased homes out there, including myself. It's one of those reasons why we feel like we're kind of getting shorted or cheated, not because of the residents that are moving there, but because more of the area we wanted to be was to be more rural with a close to city life. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, what number were you?
He was 3233.
Good evening. My name is Jack Dillon. I'm talking regarding the case of 19. Every morning, that's what we have a 5 school there. Every morning I go to the gym, 5 o'clock. Within 50 minutes, I reach to the gym. And when I'm coming back, 7:30, from Fairfax to up the Muller Road, it takes me more than 20 minutes. The traffic is so much. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We may have one more public comment.
Hello, my name is Robert Ehoff, and again, it's about traffic, safety, and fire, law enforcement, everything. I want to try to pound into you guys the traffic. You've got 4 schools in a 3-block area.
Which area are you talking about, sir?
Number 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you've already heard traffic, but 4 schools within a 3-block area. You've got 4 crossing guards, one at Red Bank, one at Fairfax, another one at Fairfax, one at Zephyr Lane, and the 2 traffic lights, and it is horrendous from the people. It's not just the traffic from the schools. Fairfax in that area gets a lot of overflow from Weed Patch because Weed Patch is heavily trafficked in early morning hours and afternoons coming home from work. So we're getting way too much traffic in a small residential area, and now they're gonna build this. Mr. Murphy, I believe it is, says it's, I think my paper said greater than 17.42 units per acre. And Mr. Murphy said it can go as high as 29. Well, that changes from over 550 units per acre, or I mean per the 31.5 acres, to over 900 units. and there's no infrastructure at that location. They'll bring it in, they'll bring in a water line, they'll put in a few fire hydrants, maybe a park, but we have no sheriffs to speak of now when we call for noise pollution or ruckus is going on. They call me back at 3:30 in the morning. Well, it's over by then, so we're kind of on our own. And now they want to add another 550 to not over 900 residences. It's too much for that area. No streets and that are going to connect. Mower would probably be the best shot, and it ends at Sterling. It's not even a county maintained road, so the traffic is. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I just have one more thing. You know, I sat as a member of staff on planning commission meetings for years with the city of Bakersfield. I feel bad for you, honestly, that Mr. Murphy has put you in this situation because he's trying to address a policy concern from the state. And how many people here have addressed specific concerns with you about this property and that property and this property and that property? We need to separate these out. We need to address specific concerns that the public has, and we can talk to developers. If we're not going to do workshops, then we can at least do it here in a public forum. We can say, these are my concerns about this specific property. We can look at a map on the screen. We can address those concerns. When we're going back and forth from 19 to 8 to 32 to 30, to all these different properties, it's so convoluted and confusing. I don't know how we can make one specific decision about 36 zone changes. It just doesn't seem like it's a thoughtful way to do business, and I'm sorry that he's putting you in that situation, so I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have no more speakers. This closes public comments. I'd like to take a short recess of 5 minutes, or let's say I have 9:33 here on the clock till 9:40, and then bring back our discussion here. So we'll recess till 9:40. And the Planning Commission meeting will reconvene. Just want to remind everybody, public comments have been closed, but you're welcome, of course, to stay and hear our deliberation on the topic. With that in mind, I'd like to bring the commissioners in and discuss the topic at hand. Any of the commissioners have any questions or wish to speak about the project?
I do. I figured I'd give my other commissioners opportunity to speak.
Mr. Judge, please jump on in.
No, all right. Well, then I will. Okay. Number one, thanks for all the public for being here tonight. I know this is affects everyone's daily lives, your schools, your jobs, your coming in and coming out. So for that, we appreciate being out here and taking the time, sitting here at this time, give public comments. For that, I want to thank everyone for being here. I also want to have a couple of questions. Staff, there were public comments, a few comments were made. I just hope you could help clarify a few items. One was we had a lot of people come out talking about local hire. Can you discuss, if at all, anything that can be done when it comes to local hire and how that correlates with this particular zone change versus actual development planning?
Sure. Again, Commissioner Judge through the chair. So the county as a whole has not adopted any local hire provisions just as an automatic, every project is required to do anything along those lines. I know that you're commissioned through a number of industrial projects that have come before you. That has been a provision on some of the conditions of approval regarding a particular project that we encourage them to facilitate and try to go through a local hire process in which at least 50% of the hirees were within the surrounding area of the project site. But again, that was site specific, and it was specifically done on the commercial, solar, wind, and industrial type of projects. I have no direction from the Board of Supervisors that every project should have any local hire. In general, regarding what jurisdiction your commission has, an overall determination of that is really kind of one of those thought that if that's a policy determination that the Board of Supervisors should generally consider. And so if you're asking me, I don't necessarily think that a continuance on all items until that happens, because that may or may not happen, and I have no idea if the board would even entertain such a motion as it came forward. But that's something that personally I believe is a little bit separate from the questions that you have at hand regarding changes in various land uses. And so I don't see any reason why, based on that comment alone, there's no reason your commission can't take whatever action you believe is appropriate tonight. As again, I think that's something better to be brought forward to them for the board's overall consideration, as opposed to your consideration. And then I guess the only provision that I would say is, while it had been incorporated on those other projects through conditions of approval, GPAs and zone change don't have conditions of approval. That is specifically part of what that is. Unlike a PD plan, unlike a conditional use permit, there are no specific conditions of approval that your commission would be able to even place on that. Even if you had the jurisdiction, there isn't any action in which you can put that on for these particular projects at this time.
And that's the clarification I was looking for. So even if there was opportunity, we as a commission do not have that capability even to put those conditions on. So I wanted to clarify that. So thank you for clarifying that. I do see also here that a lot of the concerns, and we had fellow speaker Paul come up and bring this comment, of which I also have this concern and would like some clarification to us and help to understand how this is possible. Is we come through here daily to do land and CUPs and conditions of approval, PD modification on projects, and as a developer, even myself, I know those conditions are put upon us, and those are lengthy, and they are geared towards every project specifically. Obviously, this process will mitigate that on all these parcels. So the question I have is two parts. Number one is, can conditions be put on these projects as, even though the general plan and zone change comes through, can they be conditioned to come back when they do develop? So that's the first part question. And the second part of the question I have is if they do not, what allows the county or this situation to allow to bypass that where other developers have to go through that? So if you could clarify that, please.
Commissioner Judge through the chair. So I guess I'm going to answer it kind of a couple different ways. For one, I have been working with the state on this issue for 5 years. I have had a number of projects that we believe qualified, that I have submitted to them, that they have responded to me, that said it hadn't qualified and gone forward. We are at a point now where there was no further conversation that I could have with the state. It was very clear what their direction was, which is why we undertook this particular process. Regarding having them come forward all at one time. I mean, your commission has the ability, if you want to continue some and come different dates. If you ask me, that is a very difficult process to manage as itself. I understand the comment that was provided where this is difficult. When we went through Indian Wells Valley, we changed over 3,000 zoning parcels from that particular project. Yes, it is different. That case was a little bit different than what we have here, but it's not unprecedented. And I don't know of another way to bring the entire conversation at one point. I mean, if we did it on an individual project, yes, I understand that aspect of it, but we are talking about a little bit of a bigger issue to address here. So part of going through a public process is to have these conversations, is to allow people to meet with the commission, provide their comments, let staff kind of review and see some of this. At a county this size and where the particular project sites were, it was difficult to have all those meetings. I didn't know who was interested. I didn't know who was not interested, things along those lines. So, I support whatever commission decision your commission has regarding going through this. This was the only way that I knew to bring it to the table, though. And doing it on an individual site-by-site basis is just as hard as it is bringing it all at once, truthfully. And so, there's staff time involved, there's processes that you have to go through. And so this was the way that we thought was most appropriate to bring the conversation forward to the commission and the board. And again, a lot of these need general plan amendments, so they can only go to the windows at 4 times a year. And so there's a timing issue. And again, we got our letter from the state in November, which specified that we need to move forward here. Our next housing cycle ends by the end of this next year. So there really weren't a whole lot of options that I had available, and we tried to get this to your commission as quickly as we can. And then the only comment real quick on that, I'd like to just respond. Oh, I don't know if I answered all your comments, but I do know that the comment was made that the general plan was adopted in 2020. That is not correct. The general plan we have was last adopted in 2004. So, that is a difference in terms of some of that. Regarding the questions on conditions, there are no conditions that I could place on this project. I mean, if we had a PD plan, yes, we wouldn't go through a PD process, you could place conditions on it. But that very discussion is what the state legislature says they don't want to happen at the local level when it comes to housing, because time, money, costly services, and so that's why we're reliant on our development standards that we have in our zoning ordinance. And so, again, the best I can offer from that perspective is I believe we're going to be bringing forward the R3 zone district that has different standards. If at that time, we're going to bring a potential change to have 20-acre minimum, if there are other development standards you think is appropriate, that might be the time to incorporate that. But again, that way would facilitate a buy right over the counter process for projects within the R3 zone district.
So I appreciate that. You did answer it majority. The clarification I'm looking for, though, is so my understanding is that if conditions are brought, if this zone plan does get approved, and zone change, zone plan amendment, some of these lots, partial if or not, that individual project, if it was put like on a PD, you're saying it would disqualify that from the state guideline, and that's why keeping it from coming back to be reviewed?
Correct. It would disqualify from counting towards the 214 acres that I need to address the shortfall. In general, that is what creates this issue too, is why did I not have that issue in 2015, 2016 in terms of the other parcels that we have the PD plan? We have a shortfall, and fixing a shortfall is different than the plan in its entirety. I'm allowed to have a housing element that has PD plans on it, that has R2 districts, that addresses housing for all the properties other than what I have a shortfall. If I have a shortfall, the state has indicated that I'm in a different category. And to address that shortfall, I have to do different than I did for anywhere else that we've addressed the housing element. So that is the reason why we're going to the R3 and why we're moving forward with that process.
Okay. All right. I appreciate the clarification. And then another thing I want to understand is a lot of projects that do go through this, obviously, I'd look at CEQA. what is allowing this? Is it the state allowing this, or is the county allowing this? And how do we get past that on this project to pass something not have any CEQA guidelines on it? Just clarify that.
To answer your question, we looked at all the different exemptions, provisions that apply when it comes to residential housing. And so we've incorporated in your staff report and in your findings the provisions that we think are applicable for various project sites throughout its entirety. So to answer your question is, the state has determined that there's a housing crisis. They have a lot more provisions that they say, hey, projects that are exempt under CEQA from these perspectives that have these type of projects, that's the process they can go through. So we've reviewed those and we've identified to your commission the ones that we think are applicable for this type of request.
So the state has a policy that allows this to happen, and these ones qualify under that exemption, is what you're saying. And that's why this is processed without CEQA.
In general, correct. You know, we have CEQA, they just qualify for exemptions. Again, remember, an exemption under CEQA is different. All discretionary actions are subject to CEQA. An exemption means that you're not subject to any further review.
Mm-hmm. I'll turn over to the rest of my members here to see if they have any comments prior to me. I'll finalize my comments at the end. Thank you.
Sure. I'd just like to say, again, echo Commissioner Zhaj's comments about taking time to show up, participate in the public process. We do find ourselves in a difficult position of being in non-compliance with RENA. And so that is, as Mr. Murphy just pointed out, has restricted what we could do on certain properties. So for me, a main thrust of tonight's hearing is to get us back in compliance in this process. That's going to give us more flexibility going forward, how we can manage these properties. I think some of these are probably ready. I think there are a few that have been identified earlier on that are not ready. And after I hear some more commissioner comments, we could work on a motion that would get us through with some of those, and some of those I would suggest that we come back on.
I have a few questions and then I can make my general comments. Mr. Murphy, can you talk to us a little bit about what the options are if we decline some of these parcels?
Commissioner Skidmore through the chair. So, I mean, the options for any of the projects, for any of the parcels, just in general, you can recommend approval as staff has recommended, even with the modifications that are included in the staff reports that you have. You can recommend a modified project approval. Again, if you believe that some of these should be designated a different use and you have that ability from a compatibility standpoint to make some sort of modification. You can continue all of the projects for bringing back to your commission for another consideration. You could recommend denial of some. If you think that some of them are just not appropriate right now and your overall thought is, I don't even think it's worth time to have staff go back and do some of this. This is what I think on these properties already, and you don't even want to recommend a continuance, and you just want to recommend not the right site for reasons related to whatever they may be. You can recommend denial of some of those, and that will be taken before the Board of Supervisors for that particular project site. So you do have a range of options available. Again, we tried to make this as easy as possible to at least see designations, make determinations. The majority of the people who spoke on tonight, there's a few that were not, but by my count, most of the cases that people talked about were ones that we were going to recommend a continuance. But again, it is worth your commission's purview that if you heard enough that you don't even think it's an appropriate site and you don't want to have it on there, I would actually rather ask you recommend a denial on those ones simply because I have your recommendation, and clearly if you have enough to make a determination, you don't need us to go back and do any more review, analysis, kind of visit the site again and go through that. If it is something you would like us to do, we're absolutely happy to go through that process too. But I guess my only request to you is when we build this in, we understood that we were being identified projects at a broad level and that there's a lot of things that could come happen and it goes through. That's why we recommended more sites than 214 acres, because we understood and had that this could be the case. So if your commission does believe that you have enough information, I would rather you make a decision one way or the other as opposed to just continue it. I think that's better for the residents. I think that's better for staff. I think it's better for everybody. And based on the comments we have, I think our first goal tonight is to see what we think can move forward one way or the other and see what should be looked at again, and we're happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Can staff put on the screen the updated recommendations? Thank you. So I will just generally say this, in my line of work, I can definitely attest there is no overstating of the housing needs in this community. There were over 11,500 people that applied for housing choice vouchers just this year alone, and our community was only offered 450 vouchers. So we have over 11,000 people who are looking for low-income supportive housing in Kern County alone, and there's more than that. These are just individuals that went out and applied for housing. There are a few of these that bring some concern to me, mainly over the ability to create community for these type of individuals that are seeking low-income housing. It's not just about, some of the things that we are looking at, some of the structural elements, but it's also this sense of community that comes with supporting these individuals. So I will say, based off of this updated recommendation, I am pretty openly opposed to 19, 20, 32, 33, and 35. I know that 32 and 33 have some updated recommendations, but they're based on some conversations that have happened, and I think we still had some residents come forward outside of those conversations with opposition. So I would still I'd be open to moving those forward and discussing them deeper at a later date, or I am opposed to them still currently. So I would just throw that out there for my fellow commissioners. And if there's no other conversation, then I will prepare a motion, but that's just for the commission.
Anything else, Mr. Skidmore? Okay, thank you. The chair just wanted to mention that my concern is that, our kids and grandkids have a place to live. People from other areas are moving to Kern County because they're being kind of economically displaced from other areas. So that puts a crunch on housing. At 1.5% vacancy rates, not good for people who want to move here or need to move here for work or other reasons. The state of California, though, we have not kept up population-wise with the rest of the country. So we've lost a congressman, if you can think about that, and the congressman lost was in the Central Valley for whatever reason. So, we're seeing people move away because there's no housing available here. And it's definitely happening. We do see that. And now, do we want to have people here unhappy? No. There's some areas that probably sounds like they would need other services, maybe annexation, maybe other things could take its place or help out what the service needs are. But we also realize that the Board of Supervisors has just recommended a tax increase go on the ballot for unincorporated Kern County, and that's to fund services that people are desperately asking for here as well. So, there is an acknowledgement of things that need to happen. Yeah, the roads and things need to be improved, and there needs to be funding for that, of course. But for certain, there's a lot of things that need improvement, but we still need to grow. If you don't grow a community, you don't grow the tax base, and therefore improvements do not happen. Your quality of life goes down. That's just the reality of governance and government, how it works. So I do also know that the state has mandated certain things that we have to do, and this is one of them. We're talking, in a county this size, a few hundred acres is not insurmountable. We can do this. We just need to figure out the best way to move forward here. And I think we're prepared to we've looked at some of these already in detail, and we can move forward on some of these. We're going to have to bring back for further review, but Mr. Murphy and his staff has been very amenable to doing that. So it's not a lack of wanting to look at it. I think it's just a matter of we need to act because we're being told to act by the state, and we do not want to lose out on those things that we need to continue on. we need more housing, we need more places. Certainly, Commissioner Skidmore's remarks are hit home to me too. Just looking at this, we desperately need places for people to live, and these people work and live in our community. We have to serve them to some degree. We can't ignore them like they don't exist. They do exist, and we have to figure this out. So I think right now, from my perspective, is we definitely need to address the imminent need, and we can definitely move this. And I do apologize for things being postponed. We do have a commissioner that's been long-term illness, and it's impacted our meetings, and I do apologize. There's other reasons for that. But we're making our best effort here to be here and discuss these things, and we want to go through the process together. We don't want to skip steps. We want to make sure voices get heard, and I've tried to make sure everybody had enough time to tell us what's going on in their communities, and I appreciate that. If any other commissioners have any of their comments, I think we're ready to move forward on this issue.
Yes, well, I would appreciate the fellow commissioners' comments, and based upon that, I want to finish what my overall thought on this overall process is. Kind of echoing Commissioner Skidmore said, is the situation, I mentioned earlier as well too, I believe that it's difficult to do development, and having projects process under a blanket is hard to see, because as a developer and as the developers that do come to the front of this board, a lot of conditions get put on them. There's yet with a lengthy process, a lot of funds have to be put out per project. And I do understand that this is a state requirement, and regulations are being put on from the state level, which impacts our community, our county, and the state impact that we deal with is not just on the housing. I mean, we get impacted on our oil, our gas, other sectors of our community. But as a county, we must find ways to process and to keep moving forward because we owe that to our residents to be able to do that. And with that, when I look at this, my fellow commissioners, the way I look at this is we have to do development within harmony. There are sites in here I feel that do not fit. And I believe that if we do this, it should be in a community that does follow some already pre-zoned heavier density, or has a general plan that is surrounded by some heavier density. So these are the way I looked at this process, and this is so you understand my viewpoint is, I looked at if the projects were near commercial or commercial around them, if there was already some residential R2 surrounding that property in current general plan or in current zoning processes. Also, I looked at communities that need this type of infrastructure. I look at communities like Arvin, Lamont, Lost Hills, places where people that are working but don't have the income to be able to buy their single homes. So they have to either walk, bus, or bike, or commute to get to where they have to go to work. I speak from experience. We employ many people in this county that have entry-level income jobs, and they can't find homes. They have a tough time even finding apartments. So I think this is needed in certain areas, but it has to be mindfully done. So I feel if the general plan was around that and zoning was close to it or had similar type of density or even mobile home areas, I think it fits the community needs. So to me, that's how I am looking at this. And so with that being said, I'm going to echo a few of these items. I feel that based upon the comments that Mr. Murphy said as far as what items to be continued, I have no issue with continuing items, with the exception of, I feel, item number 19, item number 26, item number 32, and 33. I am in opposition of those being part of this process, and I would make a recommendation, along as fellow Commissioner Skidmore said, that to proceed with a motion that will allow these items to be removed, to even be heard, and allow the other items that recommended by the staff to stay, and then want to to be continued. That's my overall thought. I'd love to have any other commissioners put their thoughts on those items. Thank you.
I do have a question regarding, I agree with everything that both of you guys have said. I have a question about item number 32. It seemed like that maybe those issues have been rectified with the developer and the community. Will you clarify that, Mr. Murphy?
Commissioner Ashley, through the chair, that particular one, for the residents that live closest to the site, yes. I can tell you that that community actually invited me to provide comments to them about why we're doing this, how we're going through. I went out and met with them and provided some information. I do know that the proposed developer contacted them, and the community that I had met with had some thoughts that, yes, we don't necessarily want high-density housing, but they understood what was being requested, and ultimately they had said that they were comfortable at the northwestern 10 acres only, and that was something that the developer had agreed to. But again, it was a limited number of residents that I had met with, but they were the ones that were as closest. And again, I did get a comment letter from the attorney that they had representing them, saying that if that was the recommendation that was authorized, that they were comfortable withdrawing all of their opposition. But again, I know we had a few people that commented on those cases tonight that I don't necessarily think were right within that nearest community that kind of participated in that particular process.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Just real quick, please, to make clear, I'm the closest neighbor to there. I was not a part of that, and... All right, thank you.
Public comments have closed, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, if no one is jumping to this, let me take a stab. Based off of, unless you have specifics that you want to share, Mr. Ashley.
I do not. I'd love to hear your numbers. I was just going to propose that we work on this as a list of, maybe we take the ones that are off the table for all of us and we make that decision. And then we can address the other two classes.
Perfect. So I think for the approval list that is on screen, the only item that I would say I would like taken off the approval list is there's two items, 26 and 35. I would like taken off the approval list. So that would leave us with items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, 16, 23, 24, 25, 27, 29, 30, and 37. Then for items to be opposed, I would like to have items 19, 20, 26, 32, 33, and 35, with automatic 22 as removal. And then for continued items, I would like to see items 1, 8, 11, 15, 17, 18, 21, 28, 31, and 30, 34, and 36. And Ms. Hoover, for the record, I just want to say amazing work on bringing all of this together. I can only imagine behind the scenes how many hours you put into this. So thank you to staff.
Commissioner Skidmore, through the chair. If you just desire, I can actually read that into a recommendation, because I know that ones that you had opposed, we actually need to make sure we have specific findings that says deny. I'm assuming when you said opposed, you meant deny?
Deny, correct.
Okay,
Yes,
and so,
thank you.
I mean, I think I've read what you wrote, and I concur that you got all the cases down there. And so I believe that I can format a recommendation if that is what you so desire at this moment.
Go ahead, Mr. Murphy, unless...
Can I clarify, did you include item 20 as to be removed? Is that
Correct.
understanding?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm clarifying.
So for me, just to clarify, you're going to read the ones that we are all opposing. Is that right, Mr. Murphy?
Denying.
Or denying? Yes.
Well, actually,
Tomato, tomato.
before we go, I got what she specified for denial. I think I got what she specified for approval. And so I think I can read the commission or in its entirety. I got approvals, I got denials based on this recommendation. We have no modified applications, so I'm going to incorporate that one. And so I think I can just specify and read, we'll have a section that'll be approvals, denials, and continuances, correct?
Great. Yes, thank you.
So, based on my understanding of what you had said, the motion would be to advise the board, or recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve amendments to the general and specific plans as recommended, approve changes in zone classifications as recommended, enact ordinances, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolutions for cases number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, 16, 23, 24, 25, 27, 29, 30, and 37. Further, your commission, or the motion is to recommend the Board of Supervisors deny amendments to the general and specific plan as recommended, deny changes in zone classification as recommended, and adopt suggested findings denying cases 19, 20, 26, 32, 33, and 35. And then finally, your last portion of the motion would be to advise the Planning Commission to continue cases 1, 8, 11, 15, 17, 18, 21, 28, 31, 34, and 36 to your August 11, 2022 hearing so that staff can provide further review and analysis before bringing this item before you.
Based on what Mr. Murphy read into the record, that is my motion.
I could second that motion.
This discussion, I'd rather continue personally 26, 32, and 33, just because it sounded like there were some people in favor of that, and there were some changes, I know, in 32 and 33. So I prefer we continue those because they seem like they're possible options. I agree with 19 and 20. And I guess do we need to make a motion about 22 being withdrawn, or is that off the table already?
Well, Chairman McGivney, through the chair, real quick. Yes, item number 22 was withdrawn, so there is no action for you. But I would note that for procedural purposes, we have a motion and we have a second. So you would need to vote or ask to amend that motion.
That's what I'm saying. I'd like to amend at least to pull 26, 32, and 33 from the approval to amend it, and then move that to be part of the continued list.
I would like to not make an amendment to the motion at this time.
If you're looking for my direction, I'm sorry. We have a motion, we have a second. So I believe.
I didn't know. I was looking at any more discussion.
I
We're in
apologize.
the discussion phase here, so
Yeah.
is there any more discussion?
Mr. Hall, am I correct in how that works?
Well, you have a motion. If somebody wants to make a counter motion, they can make a counter motion. And at that point, then you add seconds on top of your motion and counter motion, if that's the case. If the counter motion never gets a second, then you move forward in voting on the first motion.
Right. Like I said, there's no other discussion, and I don't have a. I could either go for vote if you don't want to won't go for the amendment. I don't know if there's any discussion on the panel here. If they want to say anything about that. Like I said, I did think there was some support from the audience on those other ones, and the 32 and 33 were to be revised as well. So I think there were some changes in those two as well to discuss. But if anything, there's no other discussion, I guess we can call this to vote. Okay. Call the vote.
Sorry, Madam Clerk, can you show that again, and you need to
Did it
read
work?
the decision into the record?
All right, try it again. Vote again.
Four ayes, one absent, motion carries.
Okay, Chairman, if you just don't mind, just because of all this confusion, I'm going to walk through some procedural things.
Absolutely, please do. Help us out.
For those residents that were here, the items that were recommended for approval and denial will not be coming back to the Planning Commission on August 11th. The next time they will be considered will be by the Board of Supervisors, and I'm anticipating it will be near the end of September. New hearing notices will go out, and you will receive copies of them if you already received one. If you did not receive a hearing notice and you would like to get one, please send an email to Cindy Hoover or myself, and we can add you to the distribution list for the Board of Supervisors hearing notice. Again, I can tell you that we're anticipating that item coming back near the end of September at the September window. For the items that were recommended for continuance, that item will be brought back to the Board of Supervisors, will be brought back to the Planning Commission on your August 11th meeting. So it will absolutely be there. The commission made this determination, so you can plan if you were interested in those cases and you wanted to come back to plan on coming back on that particular date. And in the meantime, staff will be re-looking at those cases. A new staff report will be prepared for those items that has either our same recommendation or potential revisions to our recommendation, and it will be limited to discussion on the 11th to only those cases that were recommended continuance to at that date. All those other cases will not be discussed on that, the ones that were recommended approval or denial. So I hope that helps. Cindy Hoover, Craig Murphy, you can reach out to either one of us if you have questions, and we'll be happy to help you understand and continue to walk through what the next steps are. But again, the actions absolutely have to go to the Board of Supervisors, and our contact information is on our website and fairly straightforward to find. But if you need me, I'm happy to stay once this meeting is concluded, and I can provide you my contact information, and Cindy can do that as well before you leave tonight. But that's the determination of what happened, and those are the next procedural steps. And because this is a recommendation, there is no notice of appeal that needs to be provided.
Commissioner McGiffey, do you mind if I just ask this question to staff after this is?
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Murphy, I just want to just number one, appreciate that. I just want to say, moving forward, if I have a request for staff, and if we ever look at our next housing element, this does come up, is there any way we could just kind of think about processing, maybe having some outreach to the community, to maybe having some forums or some town halls or discussing opportunities? And when we do, if this is an issue that ever comes on, when we do look at our next housing element, and the last question would be that we could also look at how in the future to help development, for that triangle these processes to help development, to maybe look at how we could revisit our PD plan and the zone process to make it a little more efficient. So just something to think about if this does come up in the future again.
All right, those comments are noted. Thank you, Commissioner Judge.
Mr. Murphy, did you want to read the?
There is no appeal process for this one, so we're on to our next item.
Did you want to read the items for the audience to make sure they knew which were approved and which weren't?
He did.
Would you like me to read them again?
Yes, for the sake of the audience, to make sure they know which ones are coming back, basically.
Okay.
We had to continue some items, so we didn't. We approved this, but we didn't really continue the other items yet.
That was part of the motion, yes.
Okay.
Your motion included the continuance.
It did continue the continuance. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
The motion included all of those, so that was continued of cases 1, 8, 11, 15, 17, 18, 21, 28, 31, 34, and 36.
Okay, so those are the items, members of the public, that those are the ones we'll be considering at the next meeting, just so everybody's clear on that.
Correct.
Just want to be sure. Okay, just want to make sure everybody knew which ones were on and off, so, all right, thank you. Our next item is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
missions. Selected officers serve as pilots and navigators aboard NOAA's versatile fleet of aircraft.